4 names. Does anybody else like to sign in to speak tonight?
In accordance with, I read it,
I'm actually thinking that after I call these 4 people, I'm going to give it to Julie and ask them to sign in after they speak.
Thank you.
Because I don't, if it's only 4, I'll be surprised.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
You need to give me one moment.
Yep, take your time.
It is. It is. It is.
What?
Is that still floating around? Give it to Mark. No. I don't. Maybe it was. Well, how are you? I did. I felt that it was a bit unfriendly, but not unlawful. No.
You good? You okay? Sure. Okay.
It wasn't asked.
We're missing people.
Rick asked Mark.
Okay. All right, we're going to start. This meeting is a public session of the Council Rock School Board of School Directors. This meeting is being recorded by the Council Rock School District and may be recorded by members of the audience. I'm going to ask us to stand for the pledge, and after the pledge, if you'd remain standing for a moment of silence for a number of things, but first of all for today's date in history and how we were all affected, additionally for some tragedies we recently had in the district. So after the pledge, please remain standing for a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Roll call, please.
Mrs. Thomas?
Here.
Mr. Block?
Here.
Mr. Abramson?
Here.
Mrs. Brooks? Here. Mr. Bartlett?
Here.
Dr. Foster?
Here.
Mr. Grupp?
Present.
Mrs. McKessie? Here. And Mrs. Sexton?
Present. Mr. Klein, Superintendent's report.
Thank you, Mrs. Thomas. I was going to do that moment of silence, but I'm glad you started. That's fine. I have only a small superintendent's report for tonight. Welcome back to school. I hope everyone had a successful start of the school year. I do want to stop to remember the boys, Seamus Stigmy, Cullen Keffer, and Ryan Lesher. I want to thank the number of people in our school community who have reached out to help us in a overwhelming time of sorrow, to remember the families, to remember the school community. And I also want to thank particularly the staff of Council Rock High School South, who rallied so well on behalf of these boys and their families. So in the midst of this tragedy, there were kindnesses and there were expressions of sympathy that really helped us get through. So I thank our whole school community with heartfelt thanks on behalf of our school, our staff, and the families. Thank you.
Thank you. Before we do public comment, I just ask the indulgence of the board. It's been requested that we do 2 sets of public comment today. The first step where we allow public comment around our discussion item of capital planning. Following that public comment, we have our discussion. Following that, we offer another opportunity for public comment on the items that we are voting on. Does anyone object?
Yeah, only if there's someone that is here for public comment, they want to leave for any reason, they have to have a schedule to leave, because they probably schedule it to be here.
I understand,
7:30,
Mr.
so
Okay, fair
person
point.
wouldn't be here.
So I'm going to open up public comment for purposes of capital planning, and if anyone has a timing issue and needs to speak at that time on one of our other points of discussion or anything else, please feel free to come to the mic. Additionally, I'm going to call the names from the list. After these people have spoken, if anyone else would like to speak, I'd like you to come up and speak. And then before you leave, after you're done speaking, if you could sign your name in for our secretary's purposes only. I would appreciate that. Thank you. Public comment is an opportunity for members of the public to address the board. We would ask you to limit your comments to no longer than 3 minutes. Please consider the fact that there may be young children in the audience or watching this broadcast on CRTV. It is our goal to maintain a respectful environment so that members of our community have an equal opportunity to address the board without interruption. While the board welcomes your ideas and will consider them in deliberating an issue, we may not respond to your comments or questions. Jenny Schott-Miller, please.
Jenny Schott-Miller from Wrightstown. I wanted to say that my family has 1 Council Rock North grad, 3 children at Council Rock North and 2 at Wrightstown. And I've been coming to these meetings because I have a lot of opinions about the capital planning activities. But I really wanted to say that, like everyone else, I watched the tragedy unfold and the response from the school district last week, and I got this lovely email through the listserv that detailed all the wonderful things that people in the community did to respond. And I know that behind the scenes, the administration and the school board worked very hard to respond in a way that created stability for the school, for the community, and for the families, and I just wanted to say thank you. I'm going to say the rest of my comments for after I hear what the administration had to say about the capital planning.
Thank you very much. Steve McGill.
Steve McGill, Northampton Township. Following last board meeting's discussion and the concern about not enough people knowing what was going on, I decided to take it on myself to add a little bit to that so that people could see what the deal was. I didn't want to make it too complicated, but I wanted to get a feel for where people were. So I got the enrollment numbers the past 12 or 13 years from the administration, put it onto a chart, and last Sunday at Northampton Days, surveyed people as they went past. You can see from the chart in front of the lectern that we have had a continuing decline in enrollment, and the projection that I've heard, although I don't have the numbers, is that that will continue for a number of years to come. So, the question to people was simply, should Council Rock consider closing schools? And almost without exception, people ask the question, well, what does that do to things like class size and so on and so forth? And, we had discussions about that. indicating that we have class size guidelines and things like that. And the fact that there has not been a redistricting in Council Rock for over at least 12 years, as far as I can recall. But to a person, people said, yes, Council Rock should close some facilities, that there's excess physical plant, and that it needs to happen. Even if enrollment were to magically turn around in the next several years, it would not indicate the need for additional schools. So that, you should put in your pot, along with feedback that you've gotten from 3 dedicated groups of citizens, and you should also keep in mind that if you don't do this, if you don't redistrict, you are denying these students the opportunity to experience change in a meaningful and positive fashion, so that when they enter the world, they will be better prepared for change. And I think that's an important lesson that you won't find in your curriculum, your academic standards, or anything else. So that's what I have to say. Thank you.
Adrian Vance?
Hi, my name's Adrian Vance. I'm from Wrightstown. I have a daughter that's in 3rd grade this year in Wrightstown, and I'm for the capital planning. As a parent, our schools represent and are the keys to our children's future success. We see them as specific foundations for our family and our communities, whereas for the school district, the main goal is to run the district as a successful business. This is not to say that a school district or its board members don't have the welfare of each and every one of its students in mind. Nevertheless, the main function is to operate local public primary and secondary schools through the use of proven business practices. With this critical and fundamental point in mind, we therefore address matters in a business-oriented method. My husband works for Siemens, which is a multi-billion-dollar corporation. They are involved in everything from engineering and green technology all the way to medical and health, which has a greater human emotional element, much like our schools. Siemens, along with many other companies, follow standard accepted decision-making techniques of SQCDM. For those of you unfamiliar with these practices, the abbreviations stand for as follows. S equals safety. In this case, how will the closure or change impact the safety of our students or of the community? Q equals quality. How will this change improve the quality of education for our students and for our neighborhood? C equals cost. How will the cost of this change improve and alleviate the already existing burden on the taxpayers along with the budget? D is delivery and scheduling. How will the new schedule impact the day of our students, allowing them to have the greatest amount of time learning in and out of school? And finally, M is for morale. How will this change be of benefit to the children, residents, and employees? What will be the satisfaction of the community, since we are the customers of the school district in this business? With my husband's yearly work budget being comparable to the school district's, it's not unreasonable that our schools should be adhering to the same better business practices used worldwide. With this topic continuing to move forward, we have yet to meet all of the required answers that are expected in the guidelines of SQCDM and for general professional business practices. Our children are our future, and the business of school should be required to produce the best product possible. At this point, the business of closing Wrightstown Elementary has not been successful in addressing all of the aspects of a proven business decision-making model. Therefore, as parents, as students, as communities, and as customers, we expect and demand that the business of our schools are handled by making decisions which are made based on long-standing proven business methods, which does not include rushing through all options without answering key aspects of each element in the decision-making progress. I speak for myself, and I know many other parents that I've talked to, that we feel that the process on our end of looking at the schools, even taking a business approach, is that it's being rushed and that we aren't receiving necessarily all the information, that we have questions regarding to each of these aspects. And we would like to get that information before we say, okay, we're good, we understand. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Tara Wigington?
Good evening. I'm Tara Wigington of Ivyland. I have a son, Liam, who currently attends the Achieve program, which is located in the LSAC building, which is included in the Capital Planning Committee's recommendations for relocation. I realize many of you were here approximately a year ago when my son, Liam, attended a board meeting and introduced the Achieve program to the board along with one of his colleagues. Briefly, I would like to give you an update on this program. In one short year, the teacher, John Engelhardt, and his support staff, along with the students, have made tremendous strides. They have successfully reached out to the community and acquired volunteer positions, which will eventually lead to permanent employment. When I looked at the capital plan's recommendations and the need for the proposal, the charge started with, and I quote, "The Council Rock School District is charged with providing an outstanding and continuously innovative educational program for all school-age children of the district. As a parent of a child in the program, I can assure you that in 1 year, Achieve has become an outstanding and innovative educational program that Council Rock, as a district, should be very proud of." To that point, every single month, my son comes home and tells me how other people from other districts are coming in to watch them, and other districts are replicating our program. I'm here tonight as a representative of the parents of the Achieve program. The parents are very upset that the district is proposing changing the current location. Unlike the school board, I am sure the Capital Planning Committee knows nothing about the Achieve program. I have a few requests tonight, which I will get to, but one of them is that the Planning Committee do as the members of the board did last year and visit the Achieve program in its current location. You do not get a feel for the program until you see it in action. When my son transitioned out of the high school, we struggled between placing him in the Achieve program or the IU's office program, which is in the same location. Well, it was last year. And the reason was because of the professional setting that was not replicated anyplace else when we were looking out of district. The atmosphere replicates a business. Each child has an office, and outside of the building, you are surrounded by other offices. My son is extremely proud of his program, as well as his colleagues. He boasts that he is in an office. I'd like to present the disadvantages of moving the current location to a middle school, and I will be brief. One of the goals of a child with special needs when the transition program on his IEP is travel training. They go to a SEPTA station with a TA, and the goal is that eventually they'll take the transportation themselves. The reason being that most of these students will eventually live in group housing that will require public transportation. There is no SEPTA in Wrightstown. There is no SEPTA in Richboro. There is one around the corner from the LSAC building. Another disadvantage is the proposal is to include all maintenance of Council Rock School District. It is not a transitional school setting if these children are mixed in with the maintenance department. LSAC location works for that reason. Another disadvantage, you build up these students to walk with their class in graduation. You tell them they are moving on. It is a consistent theme with the teacher and his staff in strengthening independence. You are no longer in high school. You are independent. And now you want to move these students back to a middle school location. The proximity works. You have Sale House right around the corner, a complete living arrangement for these children to learn life skills, unheard of in other districts. St. Mary's Hospital offers our largest volunteer pool for all functioning levels in the Achieve program. As stated, there's several businesses in the community across the street, around the corner, These children are physically, developmentally, and socially challenged, but they're not fools. They know what a middle school is, and they know it's a step back. No matter what renovations you do, and how you change the structure of the building, to them, it is still a middle school. When my son signed on to the Achieve program, we were assured that LSAC was the location for the term of his 3-year period. I was sold on the program due to the professional setting. Same reason why the IU office also worked. We gave Achieve a chance because of the teacher. We were sold on a bill of goods, as of other parents, that the district can no longer deliver on, and now have to seek other options outside of the district if this goes through. In conclusion, the parents are requesting that Achieve be taken out of the proposal and allow for renting 2 offices in the building. To approach the landlord, we've been renting it for over 7 years and paying an astronomical rent. Approach him and request that the rent be reduced. I work for the government. It works all the time. As soon as you tell them you're vacating the premises, all of a sudden the rent goes down. That's not going to be an easy easy location for him to rent. He's surrounded by brand-new office buildings. The committee has presented advantages. One of them is to save money. The other advantage, they say, and the only other advantage, is that it provides a full-service cafeteria. That's not a very good advantage. We have the sale house that provides a lot more than a cafeteria. Again, we request that the committee come and visit the students at their current location. And one final note we'd like just to make is that the amount of money the program has saved the district has been astronomical. Every one of these students would have to be placed out of district at a tremendous cost. You have brought in a tremendous program for these kids. We'd like it to continue. It works where it's located. And I thank you for your time tonight.
Would anyone else like to speak regarding capital planning? Okay, please remember to sign in after you speak.
Sorry, I just wanted to ask people, I'm Amy McIntyre from Wrightstown, from Newtown, on behalf of Wrightstown Elementary. And I would just like to ask if you're here on behalf of Wrightstown Elementary, if you could please raise your hand so the board knows who's here to support Wrightstown. The community loves this school. We've talked about why, not just emotionally, we've talked about many reasons why this is a critical school to stay open in our community. This community is engaged, mobilized, and supporting the school and wanting it to stay open. So we're going to keep coming to these meetings, and we're going to keep bringing to the table different information about why we feel this is a critical school to stay open in the district. And thanks, and I can't wait to hear. Okay, so excited.
Hi, my name is Holly Springle. I'm here to speak on behalf of Wrightstown Elementary School. I am from Wrightstown. First of all, certainly my impression is that the reason we're thinking of closing Wrightstown is because it is a small school. It doesn't meet the idea of holding 700 students. It's also an old school, but my guess is if it held 700 students, it would have been taken care of by this time. So I am going to address some of these. The last time I was here, one of the speakers pointed out that closing Wrightstown would mean there'd be no elementary school within a 10 square mile area. And I know 10 square miles, you take 2 miles by 5 miles, you get 10 square miles, but I don't know what 10 square miles looks like. So I have a map of the Council Rock School District. It took me an age to blow this darn thing up at Staples, but here it is. Wrightstown is a little bigger than 10 square miles. It's a little smaller than Newtown. Newtown's about 12. I was going to mark with push pins where the schools are, but I didn't. Okay, so we think that that Wrightstown is in danger of losing its elementary school because it's small. And because we're, tight for money. Okay, so how do we get where we are? I think one of the reasons we're where we are is because of the economy in general. Our school district is really just a microcosm of what is happening globally. The housing market, pretty much sucks. A lot of young people are waiting to buy a house. They have to find a good paying job. They have to pay off their student debts. So they're not getting married and buying houses the way we did, or people did, 20 years ago, even less than that. Governments aren't investing in education the way they used to. So we have to determine, is this the new normal, or are we at one of the swings of the pendulum? That makes a difference. Okay, another reason I think that we are where we are in regard to Wrightstown Elementary School and Wrightstown has to do with a decision made back in 1983. And that's when the representatives of the townships of Newtown, Upper Makefield, and Wrightstown signed articles of agreement and created the Newtown Area Jointure. And some of you may not be aware of what that is, what that means. Federal governments, state governments make rules about how communities must use their land. You have to have low-income housing, high-density housing, industry, business, blah, 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 blah. It's really hard for one small community to squish all that in. So Newtown, Wrightstown, and Upper Makefield joined together for purposes of zoning and created this jointure. And it was decided that they would build out from the borough, and that's where the housing would begin, which is one of the reasons that Newtown, although not much bigger than Wrightstown, is able to support 2 large elementary schools. Wrightstown took on the job of heavy industry. We have 4 quarries in Wrightstown. That's what we did. So basically, instead of having hillsides with houses on them and people going to school, we have big holes in the ground. We do. I live right across from one of these. When they blast it, my house shakes. That's the way it goes. I'm not complaining, because that was the deal we made. But that's the reason that we do not have as many people in Wrightstown as you do in Newtown, or even in Upper Makefield. Of course, Upper Makefield's bigger. And I don't know how many of you are aware of this, Wrightstown lost its guaranteed representation on the school board some years ago. Years and years ago, there was a school board member from Wrightstown. Now we share a member with Newtown. So we've already been, semi-disenfranchised. And this was when there was, a change the way school board members were apportioned. So now, after losing our school board representative, we're in danger of losing our school. I appreciate the work done by the members of the Capital Committee. I know it takes time, and I think too that when you are given a task, you really try to come up with an answer. But I don't think this is the time to try to see into the future and predict what the school district is going to look like 5 years down the road. This is a very uncertain economy. I don't think this is the time to start throwing over schools. Finally, there's right and there's wrong. There's lots of space in between, but closing Wrightstown Elementary is wrong. Intentional or not, closing Wrightstown sends the message that even when you do all the things you've agreed to do and you've done them well, suddenly the rules can change and you're no longer included in the game. You're out. I know in life that happens, but it is not how I taught my children to behave. In fact, my children were students at Wrightstown back when it first won recognition as a National Blue Ribbon School. My daughter gave the 5th grade speech at that get-together. She was proud to be a student at Wrightstown Elementary. Council Rock needs to behave with the same level of principle that we expect of our children. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Good evening. I'm Liz Smith, and I'm going to represent Rolling Hills, even though it's been many years since my children have been at Rolling Hills. I was approached by one of the parents to sign a petition to keep Rolling Hills open. And I just want to read what I wrote on the petition, so I'll be really brief. Each school in Council Rock is unique. Although every student in the district receives the same quality education, each school is different in its population and demographics. Rolling Hills has a uniqueness of the open classroom. In this day of children texting and using other social media, the concept of this environment provides the ability to interact between the two different grade levels in each of the pods, which is what the open classrooms are called, the pods. The open classroom also allows the student the skill to focus on task at hand while other classes are in progress. Being an active part of Rolling Hills for many years, I also witnessed firsthand the parental support that was an integral part of the school. Although the students will receive the same education throughout the district, I feel if these students were bused to other schools in the district, the community feel would be lost. Thank you.
And there's 100 of these. So they should get all the way around, and I'll collect them for the public. Okay? Nancy Carroll, Newtown Borough. Everybody makes mistakes, and I hate to be one of them, but I was. At your last board meeting, I presented a spreadsheet that showed CR enrollment has declined by more than 1,300 students, which it has. And after the meeting, I discovered there was an error in what I delivered to you. I wanted to own up to my mistake and make and present the corrected copies, which I sent to the board and now to the public. The mistake was made when I stated the predicted loss compared to the actual loss of the 2013-14 school year, stating the predicted loss was 1,077 students. Since then, I've used the October numbers, and the predicted additional loss from October 2013 to 2017-18 is 1,020. I sent the board copies, and I hope that there's enough of the correction for the public. So also using the October numbers, the decline in students from 2006 to the present is 1,347 students. The data sheet also shows the predicted loss made in February of 2012 for last year, 13-14, was only off by 2 students. This mistake, using the June enrollment numbers, made me realize that students come and go, not just in the summer, but all year long.
So I made a spreadsheet that shows both the gains and the declines from October 2012 to June of 2014. Although I do not think that any reasonable person would use a one-year snapshot as the start or end of a trend, I thought you might be interested that from October 2012 till June of 2014, the elementary schools losing the largest enrollment were Goodenow, Richborough, and South Finestone. Those gaining the most were Hillcrest and Marine Welsh. I do not think it is appropriate for me to correct what other people say at the mic, but being a member of the committee, I do think it is appropriate to share with you how we came to our decisions and the data that we used. So to that end, I also have for your consideration a sheet that has 5 different sets of criteria that show there is enough room in the 3 receiving schools, Goodenow, Newtown, and South Finestone, for the students from Wrightstown who live in Wrightstown and Newtown. Number 1, the decline in the number of sections is greater than in the 3 receiving schools is greater than the number of sections in Wrightstown. Number 2, the decline in enrollment in the 3 receiving schools is greater than the number of students in Wrightstown. Number 3, the amount and additions of large-sized classrooms can accommodate all the current sections from all 3 schools and the 14 currently in Wrightstown. Number 4, the Schrader existing capacity figure of 2012 will have the 3 receiving schools accommodate all of Wrightstown. And number 5, the 100% capacity figure shows that the 3 receiving schools could accommodate Wrightstown. The practical planning group I was on rejected the threshold that every school should be down to 90% capacity because it would mean that the district would have to maintain what has projected to be a declining enrollment of 1,190 seats. They would still have to keep 540 empty at the elementary level and over 1,100 for the entire district. Every way you look at it, except for keeping each school at 90% of capacity, shows that Wrightstown will fit. If you want to leave Wrightstown open because you want to maintain 241 empty seats in Goodenow, Newtown, and South Finestone before adding Wrightstown students, then that's up to you. Just say so. That's what you want to do. To maintain the 90% though, you might have to lower class size caps. And if you want to get rid of the trailers at Wrightstown, then Wrightstown's capacity at 90%, according to the Schrader report on page 124, is 238 students. Thank you very much.
Okay, we are moving on at this time to our first discussion item. There will be another opportunity, at least 2 more opportunities tonight for public comment. Mr. Klein.
While they set up, I just want to make a clarifying comment. There was a comment from the speakers this evening that Wrightstown had lost its dedicated board member. There was 1 board member set for Wrightstown. A few years ago, the school district faced a legal challenge to the way the school district was organized. And that legal challenge was that the district had not been appropriately redistricted from a voters' representation perspective. And facing a challenge and facing a court-mandated change, the district analyzed the numbers and determined to be compliant with the law that each board member had to be representative of approximately 6,000 electors. With that condition, which had to be approved by the courts, the areas of Wrightstown had to be combined with another, and so did Newtown Borough, because neither of those communities supported
6,000 electors. So I don't want anybody to have the impression that the school district arbitrarily chose to combine districts to eliminate representation of any one dedicated community. It was an answer to a court challenge, and in structuring the districts, there are certain regulations that govern, including that the represented area has to be contiguous. You cannot have two islands combined together to form a represented area. So just, the speaker was correct, Wrightstown, Upper Makefield, well, Upper Makefield still does, Wrightstown and Newtown Borough previously have had individual representatives of just those geographic or geopolitical boundaries, but due to a court-mandated challenge, and a court-approved redistricting, that was changed a few years ago. Just a point of information for people who might have heard. Sorry to take away from your time, Mark.
And actually, I had one quick clarifying remark as well. So regarding the Achieve program, we're very proud of it, and we'd be happy to have anyone come and look at it. But the planning committee has been disbanded. Its work is done, and now it's all on the school board to take their recommendations, the administration's recommendations, and move forward. So I just wanted to clarify that.
Okay, anyone else? Okay, Mr. Klein.
Good evening. In July of this year, the board heard the recommendations or began to discuss the recommendations of the Capital Planning Committee. As a result of that, the board posed some questions to the administration that we will try to answer this evening. There's no clear answer to a lot of these questions, and it is very much a way you want to look at the numbers to make the final recommendations. But I speak for our team in saying that we've looked at this in a number of different ways. We've talked about some of the various perceptions and various opportunities for us to give the board feedback on what is a very difficult process. And so I present to you tonight a framework and a set of responses to the questions that the board asked us in July. I am happy to and will ask our administrative team to script appropriate questions that the board has. We can certainly take them from the public too as they come forward and get back to you. I would hope that this continues to be another opportunity for conversation among the board and among the community about what we're doing and how we're heading. I do want to say that this is not, while the process is culminating, this is not a process that has been done for members of the community and for the board that has been done in a short framework. Obviously, we began this work with respect to the committees and the data gathering well over a year ago. It's a process that has been culminated with a group of members of our community that have made recommendations. They are just that. They don't necessarily become the endorsement of the administration or the board until the board finally makes a recommendation based on the information that they have. And so I present to you respectfully the information that we have based on current data, based on what our team believes is the best course of conduct right now. That can change at any given time, but for right now, this is where we are, and we're happy to modify, change, or put things together based on feedback that the board has and the community that will help make this a little bit clearer for everyone. The first thing I want to do is offer a thank you, and I think it has to be done over and over again to the members of the Planning Committee who have spent countless hours putting these various recommendations together, gathering data, meeting with our team, looking at the data, looking at the numbers. Their work is exhaustive, is very, very thorough, and represents three different views of the school district. So as people come forward and talk to you, one view is a little different than the other, is a little different than the other. And so when we talk about the commonalities, while there are various commonalities within the recommendations, not everybody goes at it at the same time, the same pace, and in the same structure or the same timeline. So I want to, however, I don't see Chris or Kevin, but I do see Tim and Heather. I want to thank the committee chairs most particularly for the work that they've done and for the fantastic work the members of the committee did. They spent a lot of time disseminating information, gathering information, and putting these recommendations together. They're well worth the time to read and to assimilate into our conversations. In July, you assigned us with a variety of tasks, and where you see a check mark is where I will address or have been addressed. The one place you will not see a check mark is what is the cost impact over time we can't tell you that until you tell us what you want to do, or at least give us some frameworks. So at this point in time, we can give you some general information. I'm happy to answer that, or Bob and I will work on specific questions. But for right now, the one thing that I've left out of this is any financial data. We can tell you what the commonalities are among the proposals and where they shift a little bit. We can talk to you about the 14-15 enrollment, which is interesting. We can talk to you about the potential of a school closure in 15-16. Mr. Reinhardt has already done a very good job of talking to you about middle schools in terms of the financials of whether we can move quickly on both a Newtown Middle School and Holland Middle School project. And finally, I will spend a little bit of time telling you what our administrative team recommends right now, so that you have that not as a definitive point in this, but as another set of pieces of information that you can use and put to your disposal as this conversation continues through October and into November. So here are the commonalities. It's not hard. You go through Tim's work, you go through Chris and Kevin's work, you go through Heather's work, and you start to look at this, their work and their committees. The first one is a rebuild of Newtown Elementary School. All three of those groups talk about that, and all three of the groups in some way talk about the renovation of Holland Middle School. Some talk about it immediately, some talk about it at a later time, some put Holland in front of Newtown, but all of those committees talk about a rebuild of Newtown and a renovation of Holland. In concert with that, all of them recommend a closure of Richboro Middle School. All three committees, but at different times, represent a closing of Wrightstown Elementary School, but implicit in all three groups is also a closing of Rolling Hills Elementary School, not necessarily at the same time or at the same pace, but that shows up in the conversation in all three of the groups. There's a conversation, and an important one, about the relocation of LSAC and the Twining Ford properties as a revenue and as a revenue generator or a revenue avoidance with respect to the lease of LSAC. And certainly we heard this evening one of the reasons why we need to value that, but we'll continue to look at what we need to do as our lease at the LSAC facility begins to wind down. All three obviously speak to a redistricting based on the recommendations they make. All of them are clear. We need to eliminate modular classrooms, although in putting that out there, none are very clear about how to get us down to zero. Most of them see it as the same way we have, as an ongoing process of trying to pull these things off with commensurate renovations or other opportunities to pull them off. And then investing in technology appears in all three of the recommendations. I don't believe Mr. Frederickson had any influence on any of those. I want to start with an enrollment update, and I want the board just to be able to see in our community what the new enrollment numbers look like. We've all suspected over the past couple months that what we're seeing is an in-migration, that's the word that the Pell study uses, that is actually an artifact of some of the new information we see and the new information we can assimilate about our economy. And so as a full enrollment update, we are seeing, again, a reduction in the students in Council Rock. This year, the total between when we started in October and when we start now with our most current September 8th data, that's about 150 kids down. But there's some interesting information within, and that's what I want to focus on. At the elementary level, you can see that what's happening there is that we are beginning to see either a stabilization or a slow increase in elementary. So where you see a blue number there, that means that October 13 number is smaller than the entry-level number that we have in September of 2014. In fact, in 7 of our 10 schools, we see larger elementary numbers or similar elementary numbers than we did when we opened school last year with the official October numbers. Now again, that 8th is still, the numbers in the 8th will still be migrated into our October numbers. You may see some additions, you may see some subtractions based on withdrawal. But in the elementary level, we tend not to see a lot of withdrawals in the beginning of the school year like we do at the high school level, where withdrawals may actually influence that number. So what you see right now is that in the October 13 numbers, we had a 5,408 total student enrollment. As of 9/8/14, as of Monday of this week, we have 5,425. It's not a significant increase, but it's a stabilization. And when I show you the Pell numbers, you'll be able to see that it begins to show that the trend downward in the elementary may not be happening in Council Rock as the economy strengthens and we see more of our more housing turnover. Moreover, within this number, take a look at every one of the June numbers as opposed to the October numbers. And I think this is really interesting. In every school, we either stayed the same or went up from October to June, reflecting again in migration during the school year of families that are moving into the school district and adding elementary school students to our population. When we look at the Pennsylvania Economy Leave and their trending, and we've relied on that and our teams relied on this, we were seeing a general decline, and that decline was true over the 2008 to 2013 school years. But again, what I would say to the board right now is that based on the numbers we have now, the actual that in Council Rock at 5425 is significantly different now than what the Powell study was at 5,335. That same coefficient applied to those numbers suggests that we will stabilize and not see that same decline between now and 2017-18. That's significant when you look at the elementary level and you talk about 100% capacity in our schools, because if those numbers are stabilizing or going up, it means that 100% capacity is a dangerous phenomenon in any of our elementary schools. Admittedly, you can change 100% capacity any way you look. If the board decides to change class size parameter or changes the way that we allocate kids to classrooms. But right now, if you just look at the data suggests that what's happening in Council Rock, true of most of Bucks County, is that we're seeing an in-migration and a housing market that is allowing for change that we didn't see beginning in 2008 and moving into the last year or two. I want to point this out simply because I think it explains at least one phenomenon that I heard a person mention tonight, and I think it's important. In 1999, we had 84 modulars in Council Rock spread across all of those elementary schools. In 2000, we opened up Maureen M. Welsh Elementary School, and over a period of time took the majority of those, or not the majority, we took some of those modulars away. We've gone down now from 84 to actually 26 modulars used, 37 modulars that are in play right now. And one of the reasons that's important is when someone says we've lost 1,000 kids and therefore we should be taking off an elementary school, really what we've done when we've lost 1,000 kids or 1,300 kids is we've taken off a lot of modulars. So over the course of that time, we've taken 47 modulars offline, and if you consider that 11 of those modulars are really just storage units or just now we're ready to take off and make vacant, there's 58 modulars that have come offline over that period of time. As if you look at them just in terms of student and enrollment, that's an explanation for how 1,000 kids came off of the school district, and we're not done yet. We still have that 26 where kids are actively using those modulars, and we need to find ways to pull that off consistent with the recommendations of all three of our committees. I wanted a model for the schools, for the board. And again, I know that there will be people who say there's different ways to look at this. This is just our model. This is based on numbers, not classrooms. This is just talking about where our capacities are and what they look like. So we went through the process of modeling a closing of Wrightstown Elementary School, and we went through a process of closing the Rolling Hills Elementary School, just to see if it allows us to migrate those students properly to those places without overtaxing the schools that are the receiving areas of the population. I wish I had a better way of showing this. This is the best graphic design I could come up with. But here's what I would say to you. Wrightstown Elementary School currently houses 328 students. If we were to move 328 students towards Newtown Elementary School, and I understand that one of the recommendations was, do you take 26 kids and you move them from Wrightstown because they're Northampton kids over to Richboro? But all that does is perpetuate the modulars at Richboro. So I didn't necessarily do that, although the 26 kids I don't know would make a major difference in this paradigm. If you move 328 kids over to Newtown, obviously you overwhelm that school with a current enrollment at 663. So if you took 50 kids out of Newtown to bring Goodnow at 90% capacity, you would overtax Newtown Elementary School significantly. You could do it if you brought Goodnow Elementary School to 100% capacity, I'll admit that. But we don't know what Goodnow Elementary School looks like at 100% capacity. We're just finishing the renovations there and the placement of students. So I wouldn't recommend, nor would anybody on our team recommend, that we're going to try to take 100 more kids out of Newtown and make that number 925 at Goodnow Elementary School, or 875 or 900, or approach 900 to that school. Until we actually finish the renovations, look at the spread of classes, and look at where the sections go, we wouldn't do that. So at 90% capacity, what you have right now is an over-enrollment at Newtown Elementary School that is fairly significant. If you look at Rolling Hills Elementary School, the same thing occurs. If you're trying to move kids out of Rolling Hills and you just spread them out across what are the Schrader capacity numbers with the modulars, you can move 141 students to Rolling Hills Elementary School. You can move 273 students to Hillcrest Elementary School. At the left, or on the right-hand side, where you see the green, you see what our Schrader's 100% and 90% capacity without modulars. We didn't even come close to that. You'd have to look at what the capacity with modulars is, and that's the 572, 562 number. At Holland, you don't have the modular number, so you're looking at 542 as the 100% capacity. Trying to go to 100% capacity in all of those schools, you perpetuate the modulars and you still leave Hillcrest over-enrolled by approximately 30 kids. I didn't, so that if the question's asked, I didn't touch Churchville and I didn't touch Maureen and Welsh. Both of them are over what the capacity study says at 90% in those two schools. I'm moving through this quickly, and I'm happy to go back and take a look at this, but here's what we would recommend. Right now, based on the information that Mr. Reinhardt has given us, we would recommend moving immediately on the construction of a new Newtown Middle School and move immediately to begin renovations on the existing Holland Middle School. In a timely fashion, that would allow us to do the consolidation and take Richboro Middle School offline in a short period of time. Whether that's 3 years, 4 years, much of that will depend on how quickly we can move that, how quickly we get the approvals. We recommend the downsize of our use of LSAC for lease savings. We can, with obviously feedback from parents, relocate Achieve to an acceptable place and remove the knock. And that would allow us to take the LSAC lease down rather considerably for ongoing savings that could be applied to what is the actual increases in debt service that Mr. Reinhardt has shown. We can begin to remove and consolidate modulars, particularly the storage modulars in the 3 schools that are mentioned there, and migrate to other storage options. Continue to looking inside the school for ways to move that. But I would tell you that, particularly at the schools that are there, and I'm sorry for the abbreviations, RES is Richboro, RH is Rolling Hills, HC is Hillcrest. We've used every atypical place in that school right now to put kids. They're in storage closets. They're in small group instruction rooms that should have been instrumental music rooms.
I don't think you meant we have students in closets.
No.
It just sounded.
They're in rooms that are atypical for them right now. And right now what we're trying to do is stop that. We're trying to actually move away from the atypical spaces and move kids back into spaces where they belong in terms of the way the school's been built. We do not recommend a closure of elementary schools in 15-16, most specifically because of these enrollment numbers that are beginning to change against the migration pattern that we saw in the Pell study. And we would not recommend, even though it's mentioned in a number of the recommendations, the sale of any school district property yet. So not Twining, not the house tract, not anything that we own, until we get a chance to assimilate and understand where we can move some of these programs and where we can move some of our functions in a way that's not going to impact kids or the functionality of the programs that we're looking at. That's the sum total of our recommendations.
Questions from the board?
I'll make a simple observation, if you will. You know, that you're seeing the uptick in, or that we are seeing the uptick in population. Really, I'll just take something that's occurring in my little part of the world and project it larger. My development was built in 1995 to 1998, and everyone who moved in at that time came in with children. That's why you buy a 4-bedroom home or more. You have children. So you get this large bolus, immediate bolus of many children, and they all go to the schools. And then you see, as we start to see now, that those families, the children have grown and moved out, and the parents are in that intermediate period of do they stay in the home or do they not? And so what happens in economics, you have something which we call the multiplier effect of money, which is when money is spent, you have the initial transaction, and a component of that is used in the next transaction, a component of that is in the next, and then ultimately, at the end of the day, when you look back at how many dollars were spent, although you might only have stuck $1 million or $100 into the environment, you actually get $400 of purchases because of the sequence of purchases thereafter. I think that's what happens with this. We have this large bolus, this large infusion of students into our school district with the new construction, and then it peters out and it plays out over time, and the exchange comes slower and later. So we will return to a level. It won't be the level we had before, which is without those schools, without those buildings, but the exchange, the turnover will come to a level of noise over time. It will be higher than we had before. So to your point, Mark, we had the large bolus. We saw that. There was one time we used to track, I don't know where they are now, it was the 4th and 5th grade, with some huge number of students. They've escaped, right? They've moved
Graduated.
on. Exactly. But
They're in closets at
There's no somebody's going to turn in to watch just portions of it. It's not going to be good.
They've gotten out. But this next thing, the next wave comes. So it will happen in turn. So I just want to point that out is that we have, I too have always agreed that selling the property, and you've heard me say it here, and I'll say it again and again, which is selling the property, decommissioning a school with the intent to sell it is something which I find difficult to manage at this point, because I know that there's this multiplier effect of the construction, and we will have the residual bolus will play out over time. I'm not so sure of some of the other commentary, some of the property, the Twining Fords of the world, the House Tract of the world, I'm not sure. And the other question that came up earlier, and this is extemporaneously discussing things, it was an interesting discussion. I appreciate the commentary around the Achieve program. I found that interesting. It is also interesting to note that as we look at replacing and moving different things within the building, within our buildings, the building in which we sit, all of the functions that are in this building, in my opinion, don't necessarily need to remain in this building versus other outlying buildings. So I appreciate that the notion about the Achieve program needing a walkable community, something where there's business nearby, where there's transportation nearby, maybe a more, if you will, urban setting than might be achieved with Wrightstown. To my way, as I sit here, without knowing much about it and what other plans would be, this building might serve part of that function. It's an eminently walkable part of a vibrant community, which means parts of administration may have to move. We've done it before. We've had them remote before. That's possible. Some food for thought. I appreciate I would have appreciated it sooner. Do we receive this electronically? No.
No. Okay. It'll get posted tomorrow.
So, Mr. Klein, I appreciate the work that was done. It's great stuff. I, in particular, appreciate the fact that as you start to identify opportunities around LSAC to be able to offset some of the capital needs. So that was great. I noticed, though, and I'd be curious to hear if you and the administration have feedback around the 3 commonalities at the bottom, the redistricting, the elimination of modular classrooms, and investment in technology, because I start to look at the enrollment figures, which is the most eye-opening for me, and start to think about the recommendations that you've made and look at that elementary school footprint that may not necessarily make sense to consolidate. Redistricting in trailers are something that, particularly the trailers, that we've been on a mission to close those, and there seems to be an opportunity to eliminate possibly trailers by redistricting within the existing recommendations here. So just curious if you guys had given that particular piece any thought.
The dilemma is that so many of these schools in the Northampton area where you'd be looking to redistrict to take off trailers already have or are close to capacity, with the exception of Holland. So if you looked at just one shift from Hillcrest to Holland, that would be potential to affect the Hillcrest piece. The other thing that I didn't mention, but I thought particularly one of the recommendations did a fantastic job on it, is talk about size of schools and efficiencies. And again, I know it's impossible in a school district that's already built out to say, all right, we're going to make that school 700 and that school 600. But there are efficiencies, potential efficiencies that were addressed for Richboro and Hillcrest that would involve some renovation. We certainly discussed that as our group, that would immediately take off as many as 12 modulars, but we didn't get there yet because, number one, you've got to go in space and in time, and you can't do it all at once because the potential financial burden is too great. So our recommendation is to move first with the two middle schools. You take a large number of modulars off when you do those renovations, and we begin to look for attrition and find ways to reallocate storage and to do some other things with the modulars in those places. Redistricting is a given as soon as you start to look at the consolidation of the middle level, and you can start to look if the numbers in enrollment change to these paradigms again over next year or the year after. And the investment of technology is just a matter of financial.
So some of the capacity that exists in Newtown and Goodnoe, does it become just too tough to put the kids on buses to take some of that capacity with a significant redistricting?
There's no, my opinion is there's no capacity at South Finestone. There will be capacity at Goodnoe and Newtown. The question is, how do you get, if you can't bring all of Wrightstown over there, how do you affect that? So my answer is you begin to look at how you reallocate or use some of that space for other reasons. If we have to move the NOC, if we have to move some other programs, those might be ways to use some available space in some of our schools. I recognize that what this doesn't do is address the fact that Newtown has some extra classrooms, Holland has some extra classrooms, and you can redistrict within that as part of this proposal to try to equalize that out. But right now, our first thought in terms of trying to move forward on a recommendation would be at the middle level.
Thank you.
Other questions?
How far away would that be?
Which? What?
By the time we build Newtown, if it gets built, and there was a question here as to whether that would happen, but if it gets built, how long will that be? 4 years from now? Before you would do any moving around? We're out 4 or 5 years?
Well, 4 years would be the best guess for a new Newtown middle school. What about for Holland? Probably the same thing?
Yes.
Right, and the redistricting would occur then at the middle level.
Mr. Klein.
Mrs. Sexton.
We're down 1,300 kids since 2006. If I gave you that there were 700 kids in the trailers, and there weren't in 2006. If I gave you that, there are still 600 kids that are not here today.
Across the K to 12.
We're keeping 10% of our seats vacant in the schools, going on Strader's model. 10% of the seats in every building empty. Our class sizes, while some think that they may be ideal, are not reasonable for our schools and our community. Earlier, I heard a person say that they're the recipients, they're the people that are benefits, and they're the people who come, the schools are about their families, the people who use the schools. Schools are about everybody. They're not just about the people who have children in them today. I count on children to be educated so they grow up, get good jobs, earn good salaries, and pay my Social Security. We are all codependent on one another to do well. So I care, as do most good people in our community, that the schools do a good job and provide a quality education. I believe that we can do that for all Council Rock kids. But in order to do that, we really have to be using our facilities to their best possible use. And to keep 10% of the seats empty, to meet some standard, I think it's wasteful. I do believe that we would benefit, and it would not change the ability of children to learn well, know their teachers. If we were to redistrict the entire district, as I said 2 weeks ago, this is about everybody. It's not about Wrightstown or Rolling Hills. It's about everybody to right-size each of these schools. To have Holland so under-enrolled, and it is under-enrolled, way under-enrolled, and we just spent a whole lot of money there. To take, if we start at the top and work in a cascading fashion, yeah, a lot of families are going to go to schools different than the ones they go to now, but we will be using our schools more efficiently. I cannot believe that we have gone through all of this. We've whacked the hornet's nest about 27 times. They're all pretty mad. There's signs along the roadside now. And now we're going to send them home. And you know what? In 2 years, you're going to do it again. And it just seems wasteful to me that we went through this process, because the save today won't be a save for tomorrow. Yes, I agree. We are not absolutely sure. I agree with Jerry on this. On my block, in every house where children went away, where families grew up and the older ones left, younger families have moved in. We have a ton of babies on our street. There may be change over time. But the opportunities for building new developments, particularly in the northern regions, are not really there anymore because of your zoning. And it is to say that we can't close a school, take the efficiencies of that, sell off property that we don't need. Where are we going to get the money to invest in technology? I have been most recently in a number of wonderful, consolidated, large buildings where children are learning, teachers are working, technology is beautiful, and the schools are great. We're second class to some of those schools. We look down our nose at them, but when you're in them, you see. We're second class to them. And we're stuck. We're just stuck. Now, I get that it's hard to do redistricting, but it's exactly what we need. And in another 3 or 4 or 5 years, you may have to do it again, because you will close more buildings. But you'll be running an efficient school district that can provide for all of the needs of the kids. You can sit like this, but it's not the right thing to do, because this is a community that's trying to support you. You're not helping them either.
I don't even know how to respond to some of it, but let me just say very briefly, if the premise of this is to simply close the school and cascade everything to get efficiencies, which is right now $600,000-$700,000 of estimates that we have in efficiencies. It doesn't seem right to me to do it when you're not sure that you can fit the kids in the places you're looking. Yes, if you wanted to do a full K-6 redistrict across the entire...
You can do it. Anybody with a pencil and a crayon can do it. We spent how much on an instrument? I've never seen you put that instrument up there in public to show me how
because
that
the
will
instrument
happen.
moves kids into new boundaries. If you wanted new boundaries, I can do that for you. But right now, what I'm showing you is that you are beginning to see...
You may have to draw new boundaries.
All right. I'm doing the best I can, Mrs. Sexton. I don't believe that our facilities are second to anybody around here, nor do I believe our program.
You need to take a field trip.
I do.
You do.
On a fairly regular basis.
And I'll say this to you.
Can I answer questions for the board?
We could have facilities that do those kinds of things, but we insist on staying stuck in the past. You have to move into the future. And I don't know that we're going to get there if this is where we're going to go. So
Well,
I'll just say.
My recommendations are exactly that. The board can look at those and see if there are other options for you. And you can ask me questions about helping to refine this. But from a fiscal and financial position, Mr. Reinhardt and this school district have continued to be in a very good shape with respect to the way that works. If there's a reallocation for technology pieces, it's just simply the opportunity to take a look at the budget and see where that reallocation needs to occur. But right now, this is what I'm looking at, and this is where I'm sending you the caution.
Dr. Foster?
Yeah, I mean, we're not making any decisions tonight, but we are having a discussion. So I want to understand Sol Finestone a little bit, because I don't know what the conditions are like there. And so that's a school that's said to be at 100% capacity. If you look at Goodnow, once it's completed, it'll have 60% more rooms than Sol Finestone has. But currently it only has 13% more children. So that's a big difference, 60% more rooms, 13% more children. And then when you look at Newtown Elementary School, which you've already indicated does have some space, it has pretty much identically the same enrollment as Sol Finestone, but it has 7 more rooms than Sol Finestone has. So, you know, when you look at 7 rooms, that's another section per grade. So in those schools, it seems like there may be some room, but it depends. Again, I'm scaling everything with respect to Sol Finestone. And then when we go to Holland, which I think we all admit is under enrolled, a good comparative school for it is Holland has pretty much the same number of rooms as Richmond Elementary School, and when you include the trailers that are being used there currently. But it only has about 70% of the enrollment. So there's these places where it looks like there's room, but admittedly, to get at that room, it would have to be a district-wide redistricting, which is painful. So I want us to talk that over and not walk away immediately, because especially with Holland, it's so frustrating. I don't remember what the costs were, but it was over $10 million of renovations. It's a brand new school, and we're running it at 70%, maybe a little lower. So that's really frustrating when you make something new like that and don't use it. So, but thanks for your recommendations, but I would like to push a little bit on the extra space issue.
Ms. Brooks?
This is great information. I have to say that for me, I'm a little disappointed by this recommendation, because it sends a message out to the community that I feel might ostensibly shut down the dialogue on some of these issues before this board has even had one opportunity to talk about those things. Off the top of my head, first of all, we referred to certain things as an uptick in the enrollment. I hardly think 0.3% growth indicates an uptick. To me, it's flat, and I don't know where it's headed, and that's a critical thing to know. But let's not mischaracterize 17 students. The thing that I'm confused about is Mr. McGill had a chart here that showed the huge bubble of our enrollments over the last 20 years or whatever. If we look at the schools in the northern part of the district, Newtown, I believe, never had trailers, correct?
Correct.
Goodnow has taken all its trailers off, replaced those trailers with classrooms +2. And Sol Finestone had trailers that have all been replaced with classrooms through renovations. So the number of you said that, yes, our enrollment has declined, but it's misleading because the removal of trailers has been allowed because of that. In the northern sending area, the number of classrooms has been a constant, and it's hard for me to understand how those schools can have a population that, according to that bell chart, was significantly and dramatically higher than what they are right now, and to hear the claim that those schools are at capacity.
Mr. McGill's chart shows total enrollment, not the enrollment of those schools. Sol Finestone has stayed remarkably similar over the past couple of years. So is Goodnow with respect to the total enrollment within there. Newtown has gone down significantly.
If you look at the enrollment spreadsheets, I don't have it in front of me, but I do believe that the number of sections that were housed in those schools back in the peak are greater than what we would need right now. I believe that there were, if I'm remembering it right, 17 or 18 sections lost just in the northern sections. Wrightstown needs 13 sections. So you could if you looked at it and played with Decision Insight, you could relocate all of Wrightstown and still have extra classrooms.
Okay.
The other thing is, if we're committed to taking off trailers, Wrightstown could never exist without its trailers unless we want to have a school with one section per grade. Every other school in the district would average between 3 and 5 or 6 sections per grade, even without their trailers.
You're right, and the same is true of Rolling Hills.
They wouldn't be a one-section school.
They would be a two-section
And there
school.
are, no, they could actually be 3 sections in most.
Mr. Klein,
But
I sat at Rolling Hills.
But wait a minute. My point is, though, if there was a clear path to close Rolling Hills and put those kids not in trailers, that would be a different conversation. I just don't want, I'm not saying that this is all clear to me. I'm saying I want to have the conversation because on the data that I see, there is a path that we can talk about that might be able to close this where the numbers don't look as grim, because for me, the numbers I looked at show that there's extra classrooms after that happens. Now, I may be wrong, but the point is, by you making this recommendation, I am concerned that the conversation is shutting down.
Mrs. Brooks, you asked me for the recommendation in July. I didn't do it unilaterally. I didn't do it to sabotage anything you folks are doing. I recognize that it is one piece of data that the rest of you are doing, and I know the majority of this board is not afraid to look at this and say there's a different path to that. We're happy to build that path for you. This is what I want to say about the changes, particularly at Goodnoe. We have changed the way Goodnoe looks because of the insertion of autistic support in there and the number of classrooms that are used for that. It doesn't necessarily mean that can't be altered or changed, but that does account for some of the sections that were at Goodnoe prior to this and now suddenly are minimized down. Newtown is the same way. That school has gone down in sections, and the only thing I say about Newtown, whether it's true or not, is at some point in time they're going to build on that Melsky and White track, and all those kids will be scheduled to go to Newtown. I don't know how many that will be, so it's unfair to make that anything other than you have to look at those potentials. Those were the things that happened in the 1980s and 90s when we started throwing modulars on as ways to assimilate new enrollment because we weren't ready for those changes. We're not going to see that same spike of enrollment that we did from 1985 to 1999, but we have to at least be ready for those areas where we know enrollment or where we know construction is going to begin.
Other questions? Mr. Edmondson?
Mark, I think you're right. Your recommendations are giving us a path. And I agree with them. Right now, I would agree with the recommendations. However, except for one component of it. You looked at all the commonalities, but certain of the recommendations have other aspects to them that should be assimilated, or the board will discuss assimilating them. For me, it's one is full-day kindergarten. So I'm looking at your recommendations, and I'm wondering if that leaves the door open in the future for a full-day kindergarten. And that's what I can't tell from your recommendations.
Pragmatically, right now, you have some schools that could do it and some schools that couldn't, just because of the size of the schools, the number of modulars, and the availability of extra classroom space. We've estimated, Mrs. McClendon, 16 new classrooms for full-day kindergarten, or 14? 17. So that's the dilemma. It's just space. It's also budget, it's also teachers, but it is first and foremost your ability to put a teacher in a classroom with your kindergarten students.
So if this board wanted to tweak your recommendations to allow in the future for full-day kindergarten, is it doable? Or does that mean we have to scrap your recommendations and do something different? Not that I expect the board will vote for a full-day kindergarten, but
I think it's a different conversation because it means you need to build capacity in all of the schools that don't have it right now. And it's a conversation that can be part of the path that you discuss in terms of what happens to Hillcrest and Richboro Elementary School in terms of renovations, and what do you do with Rolling Hills and Wrightstown.
Mr. Brock?
You know, I struggle with the idea that the middle school, I think that's self-evident. That everybody had recommendations around it, I think that's true. I do struggle with the idea of doing nothing for the time being. And I ask this question. and I apologize if this sounds self-serving. You spoke a few moments ago about savings of about $600,000 or $700,000. In March, I had provided you, the administration, and various people, and a plan that worked within the 10 elementary schools we have now, that without major redistricting within the school, allowed us to reduce from 226 sections to 213 sections using the equalized number that Mr. Reinhardt has used for staffing. That 5.7% reduction in sections yields a $1.78 million savings. And I know you looked at this, and I don't know.
So did all three committees.
Okay. Didn't come forward in any.
I know. And that wasn't my task tonight.
No, that
task
wasn't
was
your
to
task.
take a look at those two pieces.
That's fine. And so I think that, you know,
Wait, can you just clarify that? All three committees saw that? Is that
Yeah,
what you
all
said?
three committees were shared Mr. Grupp's paradigm of doing that. It went on the capital planning site.
I got no feedback. So it's what it is for board members and for the public. It's a think piece because it really was using historical capacities of the buildings, and without closing any schools, the notion was to combine schools together. And the reason, two at a time, and that, for example, Churchville and Welch, just picking two, may not work geographically, but by combining those two schools, and within that environment of the two schools, those two schools would have to service K through 6. But one school might service K through 3, and the other school would service 4 through 6. The reason this gives you a savings of $1.78 million, there may be additional travel charge involved, but by 13 sections is because it avoids prematurely splitting a class when you add another student, and it allows you to get to more of an optimal size. You've heard spoken of in the various committees that 700 was a good number. But we don't have buildings. Mark, you spoke to that a few minutes ago, that we don't have. You can't, wishing just doesn't make it so. You can't make a building that holds 300, hold 700. But by adding 2 buildings together, or you could creatively add 3 buildings together and split the grades differently, it still keeps a smaller physical school, but allows for a larger pool to draw the 6th graders from the 5th graders from. So I guess what I'm hearing from you, Mark, and I guess is that sort of recommendation, which is working within the bottle that we have now, still is potentially out there as something to do.
We just haven't had a chance to explore. Most particularly the transportation element of that is a little mystifying to me. I'd have to have Mr. Pinero model what it looks like in terms of transportation. But yeah, the paradigm of having a K-3, 4 to 6, I don't know educationally what that looks like. I'm not sure anyone has anything quite like it, but
what it allows us to do then is to the optimization of the 2 buildings together, they split where they split. One building might be K to 2,
there's no
K to
question
3,
it optimizes better.
another pairing might have a K to 4 or a K to 2. All right, just so long, I just, candidly, it's not because I came up with it. I thought it was, Denise, I know you had looked at it and said, it's an unusual approach, not invalid, just unusual. And I think that's one of my struggles here.
I think I said creative.
Oh, thank you.
So, Jerry, that model exists about 5 miles from here in either Lower Moreland or Upper Moreland, where there is a primary school, an intermediate school, a junior high, and a high school on a very large campus. It exists now.
Okay. So it's not invalid necessarily.
No. But that campus is all in one place.
Correct. I'm not looking to combine, you're right. And that would be, and I think that's the difference, which was you can over-polish something. And I think if we tried to do that here and bring a building for kindergarten, a building for 6, a building for 4, wouldn't work. This was to preserve some nature of schools within the community and some sense of community within those groups. All right, so long as it's not off the table, because that was my question was, to your observation, Mark, you did the analysis of what was presented, and I guess I somehow share Patty, and maybe it was Denise as well, their notion that we must be able to do something before so much later. That's my interpretation. What words you used, I don't remember. But it seems like a long time to wait. If we could do something to address...
I didn't say we do nothing.
No.
And at some point in time in this process, you're going to do your middle schools.
I agree.
It's a matter of prioritizing. It's a matter of, at that point in time, being able to take off one of your greater efficiencies. And in the meantime, we can look to find efficiencies in other places.
I have a couple comments. Do you want to go first, Ms. Dixon? I'll start with that. I am in favor of getting the middle schools done ASAP. I am horrified at the thought that we would build a new middle school so that we could keep kids in school and still build middle school, and it will still take 4 years. And somebody, somewheres, I will be out there every day for 4 years with signs saying, that's ridiculous. We have the property. And I know it's because we have to go through township, we have to do this, and we have to apply these forms, and we have to do all these things. But that makes me crazy, and it's not your fault, Doug. It's not anybody's fault other than it's a hideous process, my opinion.
If you could make it a little bit of Mr. Taylor's fault, then people can start shooting darts at him.
No, it's not Mr. Taylor's fault. Please do not shoot darts at Mr. Taylor's. He tries to move it along, but that, I don't know, if I was sitting in the public, I'd be, how could that be? That makes me crazy. But I am in favor. I'm also in favor of doing it as possible. It is illogical to me, and we talk about buildings and space, and for me right now, I want to talk about the student and the education and things they learn. That a student could go to a 700 student elementary school and a 300 student middle school and a 2,000 student high school, which my children did and all lived and were fine, but I think it would be much better if they went to a elementary school, a slightly bigger middle school, and a bigger, because there are a number of our students who go through a significant transition into a 2,000 person high school, and particularly when they came from Richboro Middle School is relatively small, and I love the school dearly, but I don't think it's good for our kids. So there's lots of business reasons for me, there's lots of financial reasons, but there's also very, very valid student reasons for me, and I would like to move us forward in that middle school with as much speed as we can muster. And I think that's a good project. I also think the Richboro Middle School, as far as space, if we can begin to use that space, there's a lot of opportunity with a lot of ground to explore a variety of things that could both affect the district financially and efficiently. It's a very big space, and there's some real good opportunity there. I don't know all those answers, but I think that's a great conversation this board should have, and we should definitely look into it, particularly if we've got 3 or 4 years of planning to go. On the elementary school, I am extremely torn. I've gotten several notes from people. For someone like myself who's typically tremendously outspoken, I haven't really voiced an opinion. I am tremendously torn, and I'm going to have to figure out where I stand in these next few weeks. But I a little bit disagree with Ms. Brooks. I in no ways think your recommendations stop any conversation I'm going to have. I find it interesting. I find the work of the committees interesting. I am finding it challenging to be fiscally responsible and not so over-aggressive that we close a school that a year later we think we need to open. And to me, that would be very bad for kids and not really fiscally responsible. So along those lines, I know that there was a lot of numbers given in the other proposals, and I know it's not your recommendation necessarily to close an elementary school, but I would like, I would ask that some work be done, that if this board said to you, we'd like Wrightstown Elementary closed, what does this district stand behind as the savings financially to the district? And I'm strictly looking for, not to say, oh, well, then we move this stuff into this building and then we save the money from renting that space. Just if we shut the building down and we still had the space, just the raw numbers savings. And I know, again, the committees, but I'd like it from you, Bob. And I'd like the same information for Rolling Hills. And I think I and everybody on this board has a very, very hard task. I watched all last year, and this can't all be about our personal experiences, but in a 80 home development, no home sold. The year before that, 1 home sold. This summer, 5 homes sold. Every house had 2 kids in it. I'm going around counting the kids. I'm like, oh my goodness, we thought declining enrollment was coming. So I don't know the answer. I intend to pore over these numbers. I intend to listen to people at the mic. I intend to talk to my other board members and listen to their opinions. But this is the beginning of the hard conversation that I think needs to take place on this board next week and on that Saturday. And I wanted to put out to the board, I know we delayed a week for very good reasons, but I didn't know if you wanted a 4th meeting or you wanted to see how we were going to progress with the meetings we have set up so far. But that's where I stand. One last thing I have is I intend to go back and look at these things. We have an email address set up for questions, and I heard at public comment that they had lots of questions that were unanswered. So I would really encourage anybody to get their questions in, and I would hope that we could work on that Q&A document for next Thursday, at least for the questions we've been asked so far. Certainly, if you get asked a question at 6 o'clock next Thursday, you're not going to have that answer that night. But if we could get that Q&A document out to the board, and we could have that so we could use that in our evaluation and our determination, that would be great.
You may not know the answer to this tonight, but do you know how many students from the Ivy Land section, Northampton Township, are enrolled at Wrightstown?
Oh, I do that. It's 26.
26, okay.
Let me just say, that's a year-old information, Mark, so I can check that for you, but it was 26 as of last year, I believe. There really were kids that were on Sackersford Road that went to Wrightstown, and it's one basic cluster of kids that go there.
Right. Have we looked at all sending those kids to Maureen Welsh?
No, other than it's at 90, a little over 90% too. Yep.
Well, I for one, am not sold on the Schrader numbers of 90 and with the class sizes, and I wouldn't be opposed to pushing that a bit. I'm disappointed personally in the recommendation. I understand if I was in your position, Mark, I think I would probably make the same recommendation. That's why we're elected to make these hard decisions. And but I also hope that it doesn't stop the conversation, not from the board, but from the public. Tonight I heard the comments from the Achieve parent, and that does put a different light on things for me, and it's important to hear those things. So I don't want anyone walking away from this thinking, well, great, we saved the schools, we did what we were supposed to do, the administration wants to keep everything as it is and build a new school, and we're going to rubber stamp it, and that's not the case in my opinion. Someone had said to me at a community event, because like all of us have been talking to a lot of people about this issue, and they said, I think the administration is going to come with a recommendation to keep the schools open and build a new middle school. And I said, I can't see how that could happen. I just can't see from this data how that could be the recommendation. So I am disappointed in this recommendation, but again, I hope you don't take that as a negative. I may do the same thing, may have done the same thing if I was the superintendent at Council Rock. But I'm looking forward to the rest of the conversation.
Can I ask you, with regard to the recommendation, your disappointment, can you try to isolate the...
Well, it does feel to me as
aspects of it?
That it's a do nothing other than build new, right?
Well, close Richboro Middle.
Renovate Newtown Middle and close Richboro, which was the same recommendation we heard very close to when we started this process. So to me, it just kind of feels like we've pushed that work aside and we're right back to where we started.
I think closing a middle school is pretty significant. It's just I don't think there was a lot of opposition to it.
So I
Ms.
just
Sexton,
have,
sorry.
while you're getting the information from Mrs. Thomas that she wants, I want to understand better. If you were to close a school and redistrict throughout the district so that each class had 25 kids in it, not 26, not 27, not 30, 26, 25 kids in it, how many staff members would we lose? If we took the district and cascaded the kids, starting Philip Holland, 25 kids, next 25 kids, 25 kids, do that all the way through, I want to know how many staff members we could lose.
You
Because
may,
when you tell me that it's $600,000...
you may gain.
What?
You may gain. I don't want you to go into, I'm happy to do that. It's an interesting model because you have a number of elementary sections that are 26, 28, 30. You may gain staff on that paradigm.
Well, when you fill them down into Holland and fill up spaces and do that all the way through, equalizing it as best you can, that's what the real number of savings would be to me. Not, we're going to have to keep Wrightstown open one way or the other. It needs heat, it needs air conditioning. We can't let it sit there and turn into mold.
Right, that's exactly
You know,
right.
that's not what's going to happen to that building. It either would have to be knocked down or maybe repurposed as a community center for Wrightstown if they would be interested in buying it someday. Maybe that community could have a whole new home. But who knows? Who knows over time? But
I understand that, Ms. Sexton. I'm happy to try that model.
It is in staffing. It's in staffing that we save money. Now, if this board wants to keep open enough space in every school to start full-day kindergarten across the district, then that's a whole different thing. It's not something I believe in because I think I have a lot of reasons why I don't believe in it, but one is that we have a lot of business in our community that relies on providing that service for people, and we just knock them right out of the block. So I don't know. That's where the savings are. It's in staff. It's in pension. It's in benefits.
So, you know, along that front, if you go through the Schrader report and count all of the full-size classrooms, there's 274 of them. If you take the enrollment figure and divide that by those number of classrooms, it comes to be almost exactly 20 children per full-sized classroom in the district, and that's ignoring trailers, no trailers included.
But it also ignores the special ed classrooms where there's only
Right.
certain, I mean, that's what I was going to say about Newtown earlier. When I went to
Right.
Newtown, I thought, oh, it's a big school, there's going to be a lot of space. When I toured it, it was a few years back, I didn't see a lot of space, but the one whole wing had classrooms with 8 kids.
Right.
6 kids. They were, you know, life skill.
In that number I've given you, I've left off the 54 rooms in the district that are half size.
Okay, so I'm just saying, you just have to, that's the only thing in counting classrooms that I saw that was different.
So it's those kind of numbers, and then beyond the 54, there are rooms that are quarter size and all
Right.
of that. But, you know, 274 full size, 54 half size. But one thing I'd like to know, you know, in the process of the capital planning committee, there, Bob and Tim and others tried to create the idea of a generic school, but it didn't have the programming part to it. And so when you look at our schools...
I apologize, Dr. Foster, a what school?
A generic school.
Okay.
Like, you know, what's a standard school?
700, got it.
So when you look at something like Newtown Elementary, it's got 35 full-size classrooms, but it only has 1 special ed room, and that's a multi-disabilities special ed. Other schools have more district special ed, but just within a school, how many school special ed rooms do you need? You know, we know you need an art room, we know you need a music room, but that kind of programming view and which parts of the special ed can we move from school to school versus which need to be in the generic school? I just have to say I don't understand that. I would like to know. So that's a request that I have.
At some point, Tom, I can have Dr. Lambert speak to that. It is a very interesting conversation, and it is a dynamic not only of what we choose to do, but what the state allows us to do, the square footage that are assigned to our kids, and how often we can change a program.
And the reason I bring it up is we're taking schools that are small, packed to the gills, like Hillcrest and Richboro Elementary. We're putting a lot of district special ed there. These are our 3 section per grade schools. Other schools like Goodnow that could be 6 sections per grade, you know, does it make sense to have more of the special ed there so that, because when you have district boundaries, if you're trying to hit a 2 sections per grade school or a 3 sections per grade school and hit 25 per classroom perfectly, it gets really hard the fewer the sections that school has. So I wanted to interject that thought. into the conversation.
The other thing that drives me crazy when we talk about this is that I know that Rolling Hills you use it now as 4 classes in the pod, but it used to be 7. There were 7 classes there when my children went to school, so let it be 6. They're still going to get a quality education, and you're going to get a lot more classrooms in that building. The buildings are not being used. So we need more buildings. We need more teachers. This is all cost, and it doesn't give a better quality of education. Even in our discussions, you can't show me the difference between 25 and 27. I will give you the difference between 27 and 37, even between 27 and 33, but not between 25 and 27.
I don't disagree. And you have 27s, 28s, 29s, and 30s in a lot of your elementary school classrooms.
But we also have a lot of 20s.
Yes, we do.
Well, a whole lot of 20s. And that's true in the high schools, too. Classes with 20 kids. It is very hard to afford that and have the extra money to do a good job on other things.
But that's our decision then.
Right.
And we got to look at class size and we got to decide it.
I'm not saying big class size, but
I'm just saying, I think that's a board decision. I mean,
well, it's been a board decision to have a policy.
Right.
But it's been an administrative decision for a long time in how kids are placed in classes and what the number of kids are and how we say the building is at capacity, whether it is or it is not. So it's been inefficient.
All I'll say is that we followed it, on the elementary level, we followed our guidelines. Those are the guidelines of the board. And maybe we go back to what Mr. Abramson was saying, is that one of the things we should be talking about right off the bat is whether those guidelines should be policy or whether they should be altered. That wouldn't be our recommendation, but it is an interesting conversation. Any other questions? I scripted quite a few. I will script them back to you so that you can see them and revise them if you think they need to be.
and to the extent we can, we should try to get you as many as we can as soon as possible so we can have some Q&As for next
Sure.
discussion.
This will get posted on the web tomorrow, and the Q&As, along with the questions you've asked me, will also get posted on the web as soon as possible.
So for structure, if anyone else has any other discussion, and we can continue to have the discussion, but for structure, next week, I'm just going to put a section of open discussion on the agenda. Everyone's in agreement? Yes? Yes. Okay. And then we also have a Saturday scheduled on the 20th, starting at 9 a.m. I haven't published an ending time. We haven't really talked about it. I thought 9 to noon, that by 3 hours of talking, we might be needing a break. And is there a desire among the board to add another night of discussion? Do you want to wait and see how far we get? Mrs. Sexton saying no more discussion.
We do need where in October to publicize them. We need to know.
Okay, so let me get to September 1st. Do you think, can you tell me your opinions, guys? What do you want to do? Are you good with the 20th? Yes? Mr. Emerson? Mr. Biley, do you want more? Do you want me to schedule another meeting after that?
You're looking at Rick, but you said Mr. Bialik, so...
Well, I am, because he looks like he's going to say something, but he's not saying anything.
No, I'm just thinking, why don't we wait until after the 20th before making that decision?
I agree.
You want to wait till the 20th to make the decision?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Grepp, any comments on meeting?
You know, we had said to the community we were going to do 4 meetings. The last one, this one, and 2 more. That's what we said.
That's why I'm asking you the question.
So I think that given that tonight didn't provide any great coalition or coalescing of opinion, I think that to say right now, we'll have 2 more after this, it's not going to cut it. I think you need to add a third back.
Other opinions? Ms. Sexton, you're good with the meetings we have scheduled, I take it?
I'm coming to all of them.
Last meeting.
Dr. Foster?
It's fine. I'll come to all of them.
Yeah, I think we should, let's see how it unfolds before we add anything else into the calendar.
Ms. McAfee, any?
I'm fine with that, so long as the public has the opportunity. to chime in on whether they...
So I'm not trying to cut it off and saying on the 20th, if we decide we want to have another one, we can't. I'm simply, I started the letter to the public, which will go out tomorrow, but I wanted to see what the will of the board was, that we will have these meetings.
My problem is our calendars are hard to get to.
It is, and that following week, I think we would have to do that following Tuesday night if we wanted to keep it moving in September. I don't know if there's back to school nights, I didn't look.
I don't know whether Jewish holidays are.
They're Thursday and Friday. I did look.
Funny you should know.
Funny I should know.
2 weeks, Thursday and Friday.
So I would suggest that if that Tuesday night, following the 20th, oh no, I will, well, I won't be here, but you can have a
Is
meeting.
that the, next Tuesday is out here?
No, it's 20...
It's the 23rd one.
23rd. I won't be in town, but if everybody else will. Okay, so just hold out. We'll say that the meetings are going to be there with the possibility of a fourth meeting. There were also 2 dates picked in October for public meetings. And so those dates were picked. There was some discussion at the board table about being concerned about where those meetings are held. Do you have an opinion?
Well, if we take a vote that we're not closing a school, you had the meeting so that you could close a school. I mean, wasn't that, to meet a legal requirement to close a school, we were going to have those extra meetings?
So let me explain the way I originally was talking about this, what I was thinking, because I kind of laid out the timeline. Whether we close a school or not, my understanding would be this board had a desire to build a 5-year plan. And in order to do that, there would be a series of motions or a series of items that some of us may or may not want to do, each individual little item. So as we make discussions, people would say, well, I would like to have us vote on a motion to close Richboro Middle School. Or I would like us to vote on a motion that says we're going to go to 2 middle schools. And then we'd have that discussion. If there was enough people who wanted to have that motion on the table, those motions would become the list of motions we would be considering.
And I mean, really, aren't we?
I didn't think we were going to vote at each motion, because you want to have a time when the public knows what you're planning for.
But aren't we trying to?
Give me a suggestion, Mr. Section, if you want to do something different.
Why aren't we trying to approve a
a
plan? These aren't going to be actionable motions because they're so far into the future. I mean, Mr. Cox can advise us. It seems like we're just approving some kind of capital plan.
You don't have to vote on it.
You don't have to vote on it, and even if we did vote to close Richboro Middle School, it's so far into the future, it's not a really an actionable vote.
Let me just, and I'll put this as an attachment to the solicitor's report so it's in writing so you can all see it next week. But the legal process, so the board has broad discretion to close a school as it deems appropriate, but there's a procedure that it has to follow. So you have to have a hearing following 15 days notice, which is public. Following that hearing, there is a 3-month cooling off period, during which point the board doesn't make a decision. It receives input from the public. Following that it's either 3 months or 90 days in the statute. Following that period, the board then makes a decision at an open meeting, and it sets a date certain. And it has to give 60 days notice to the affected employees prior to the start of the school term in which the closure will take effect. So those are the operative timeframes. So you're talking about a public hearing following 15 days notice, advertised as public meetings have to be advertised, a 3-month waiting period where the board receives input, then a decision, which, if the board decides to do so, closes a school effective at the start of the next school year or whenever, at the beginning of, but it's at the beginning of a school year, and that closure takes effect after the board has given 60 days notice to the professional staff that would be affected.
Mr. Cox, you're using a term, and we went through this a couple of times. You're talking about closing a school. Now, certainly, the ultimate definition of closing a school is no longer sending students there and delisting it with PDE as a primary or secondary educational facility. That is, we will agree, one aspect of closing a school, and it's a penultimate legal term, is the final one, delisting it with PDE for primary and secondary. The act of no longer using a school with having students in it, but continuing to list the building with PDE as a primary or secondary school. What are the legal requirements around doing that? If we were to suddenly, not suddenly, that sounds terrible, but if we were to opt to no longer use a given facility to put children in that school in a given year, what is our obligation? Because I want to be very careful that we will delist about any potential delisting of a building, because some of our buildings may be situated structurally or in an environment that if we went to relist that building in future years as a school, we would be precluded because of some material deficiency, such as if a property had to be 10 acres and an additional 10 acres for every 100 children, and we only had 30 acres, but we grandfathered and had 400 kids in that school, we'd be fine right now. If we delist it and we went to reopen it, we couldn't reopen it without exception. So I want to be very clear in your definition of what we need to do. You've been accurate. I fully subscribe to it, to delist a school with PDE. But I want to be very knowledgeable and aware of what the difference is if we elect not to put children in a school but continue to list it, or is that not an option to us?
That, I will have to look at the case law, because your question is specific, but I would tell you that just because you don't delist it doesn't mean that you don't have to follow the process that I've laid out. So what I suggest to you is, if the school is going to close, if a school is going to be closed as an average person would define that term, then the board has to follow the procedure that I just laid out. And I will look at that more extensively, and I'll put that in MF.
I just don't want to have gone down a path that forever, that we can't undo. I just don't, I don't want to act in haste and repent at leisure.
And so that's where my advice comes from. If it could reasonably be interpreted as a school closure, then our advice will be to follow this procedure that we've laid out.
And the point I was making was that makes sense, right? But for the middle schools, it's so far in the future, there'll be board elections and all this stuff, so that's all.
Well, I think I thought what we were all trying to get to is like kind of a 5-year plan.
Yeah.
What do we want to do in the next 5 years? So I thought we need to agree on what motions we're even going to vote on, and then the public will hear, these are the motions, tell us what your thoughts are, and then we vote. And if there's 5 of us that want to do this part and this part, then those are the parts that get done, and not this part, then that part doesn't get done. If somebody has a better way of trying to coalesce this, believe me, I am open to it. So I thought these next few meetings were for us to each put forward or weigh on, here's a motion I'd like to see put forward before this board, for up or for down, and then people weigh in and discuss it, etc.
So if by building a plan that has the alignment of the board and any potential school closures or consolidations are out a significant period of time, even though we're planning to do it, but haven't...
Then we have to do all those other actions.
Do we have to follow that process up front as we're building our plan, or can we build our plan and then have to follow that process, say it's 2 years out before we might close Richboro? And can we start that process 6 months before the actual closure? I know how work's got to go.
What I would say is, if the board is voting to approve to close a particular school, it has to, prior to making that vote, it has to advertise the hearing, hold the hearing, and then wait 3 months. Then, at that point, it's free to vote to approve a school. It's not free to vote to close a school prior to that 90-day window expire. But after it expires, it's free to vote to approve the closure of a school. And then it picks a date certain at the beginning of a school term that has to be at least 60 days out from that vote, so that the school district can issue the appropriate notice to the affected employees. So it could be some long period of time out from that date, but it has to be at least 60 days. And it has to occur at the beginning of a school term. Or layoffs or bumping of professional staff would be ineffective under the law.
Could this be mitigated, however, if the union representing those were to agree to something outside?
I prefer to discuss that in executive session. I would urge you to. Dr. Foster, you vote.
Well, I just wanted to say, it wouldn't make sense for a board to vote to close a school tonight, 5 years from now. That's all. I mean, we could do it, it's just a weird thing to do.
The point is, though, if we, as a board, are committed to closing Richboro Middle School, that would be connected to close to $100 million worth of renovations. I'm kind of comfortable, if we were to move forward with that, in having faith that future boards, after we've spent $100 million, will go through and close that school. On the other hand, when you have a situation like an elementary school where you are not spending money to close those schools, it's really just redistricting, what I'm hearing is that that is done on a year-by-year basis because you can't, the process doesn't allow for that. But I'm comfortable relative to the middle school because we're taking certain steps that it would be kind of weird if future members of this board didn't follow through on that domino. I mean, it's possible, but I would take that leap of faith.
So, just so we're clear, I've asked our solicitor to be at all the meetings. Okay, so if we seem to have consensus on a motion that we're not going to be able to vote on November 6th, but we're going to have to wait the 3-month period, then we will be able to talk it through at that time. I still think what this board needs to do is decide on the motions you'd like to see, or the things you'd like to see happen to build the 5-year plan. So, I mean, that's what we want to get to. The way we get there may have to be altered based on feedback we have from the solicitor.
I had a different understanding of the process, and I didn't expect any motions or votes until November 6th. I thought that we were going to have discussion, we were going to have an opportunity for the, perhaps to meet out in public in the potential affected areas, and then, when we have all the information and we have our thoughts all together, then we can propose some motions on or after November 6th. My concern with rushing this and maybe missing meetings or whatever it is, or whatever we decide to do here tonight is, it goes back to my concern about the administration's proposal, is that now it feels like if we cut meetings or we're not having this meeting, that it's done. And we're not listening to the public and we're not hearing each other's thoughts, and I don't want to do that. I want to stay with the plan that we had, and I really would not feel comfortable voting on any motion prior to that November 6th date.
No votes were supposed to be taken, but we have to tell the public what it is we're even talking about.
Understood, but that's not what you said. If you want to put forward a motion, if you want to have a vote at one of these meetings.
No, I said put forward a motion so the public could see this is the set of motions that the board is going to vote on November, or are up for, so they have a full month to read what the things are we're going to actually vote on. Okay. That's what I was trying. So I'm not saying we shouldn't do it a different way. I'm just trying to say, so if maybe there's only one person that wants to close ABC Elementary School, but they want that motion on the board, we have to discuss if people want to see that in the plan. We can put it in the plan. People can have their opinions on it. We can listen to the public on it. But we need to come up with what it is we're going to vote on and tell the public. Right now, it's just a lot of different ideas. They don't even know which ones we're going to vote on. So somehow we have to coalesce into a set of things we're going to vote yes or no on. Yes, Mrs. Sexton.
Just between you and I, Mr. Violet.
Okay.
And everybody else.
So for me, I will go anywhere you want to go. You want to go to Wrightstown, you want to go there, anywhere. We can all, that's fine. The television here is so bad, Northampton can't hear us hardly at all. So when they're home going, it's really bad for the Northampton people. But the thing is, to say we should go to the affected communities, when you say that, I want to jump through the roof, because all of our communities are going to be affected. Every person, every home, every school, they're either going to pay for it, or they're going to have children that are going to be moved to or from it, or there'll be some change in people's lives. So it's everybody. That's why, in my view, this is our central home. Bad as it is, the television could sort of work here. I don't know how it's going to broadcast well from Wrightstown or from Richboro or from Rolling Hills. And those facilities are not really set up for that too well. I don't care if it costs extra money, if that's, if that's what we're going to do. If it just has to be taped and then we show it later, that's okay too. But that, I just want to say that all of our communities are going to be affected. That's it.
So between you and me, Patty.
Okay, you and me.
I understand that, I do, but there are parts, if we close Wrightstown, if we close Rolling Hills and Richboro Middle, there are sections of the communities that are affected greater than other areas. Immediately, right now, they would be affected in a greater way.
Right.
One of the things that we heard from the community, and I think all of us had a concern about it, was that we didn't do a good enough job of getting the message out there. So all I'm trying to do is reach out. It's simply an idea. I'm not terribly passionate about it. If it works better to be here, I'm fine with that. But if we can reach out to the community and have our meetings there, why wouldn't we do that?
I just want to say, I agree with you. I mean, if it can be worked out and if it's, feasible to record and whatever, I would like to see us move out of this building because I know it's shocking. A lot of people don't even know where this is. This is not a comfortable place for a lot of people. And maybe it's intimidating to get up and talk here. And if we can provide an opportunity for people to feel like they're in their home and in a more comfortable place, I think that could help. But if it's complicated and it's, we can't work out the details and the right space and the dates don't work, that's one thing. But I would like to see this move out a little bit closer to people.
So I have an idea in the middle.
What if you didn't know it from
That's what I was going to say.
Here's my problem.
People know where North and South is.
If you locate it, if you choose to locate it, neutral ground, you're right, you may not know where this is, neutral ground. If you were to say that we should hold one at Wrightstown, because that's under discussion, I could also then advocate and say, no, you should hold it at Newtown Elementary, because that's where those kids are going to go, potentially, making up a hypothetical, and those parents are going to want to know that their school's going to be busier, and some of those kids are going to get moved. So where do you draw the line? Because then should you hold it at Newtown Elementary?
How about north and south?
Well, I was saying, talking about elementary schools, I think you're more appropriate to hold it neutral ground from an elementary school perspective.
I'm not having an opinion on where. I just want to see this come into the community to allow a better dialogue.
Okay.
Because I think
Let's do that.
I think this space does not attract a crowd that you would see if we were in one of our schools.
And can I ask from it's a financial consideration. There is nothing that seeing this live provides better insight than seeing it the next day. And I ask the question because fully staffing, when we set up for South last time for some meeting, our most recent traveling road show, it took staff an entire day. Now, I don't know how much that was because of wiring or because of communications, but setting everything up, all the mics, all the switchers, all of the communications back, took staff time. Would it still take a nod, yes or no? Would it still take, Bob, he needs a microphone. Not you. Matt needs the microphone. Well, is it going to take a lot of time? Because do we need to have it live, is my question to the board, for the perspective of how much is that going to cost?
Whether it's live or it's recorded, we still need at least a day to set up at the facility, whatever facility you pick. We still need at least a day to set up and test.
Would you need more if it's live?
No.
Are the costs the same?
Live versus Memorex?
The cost would be the same.
Okay.
I still need a crew there to do the recording, so.
See, that's where it's going to cost you 2 extra days. It's a small price, but you're going to pay 2 staff days of multiple people to set it up versus doing it in a place where we hold it regularly.
But the other, I think part of, and stop me if I'm wrong, I think part of what Denise is saying is, and I agree with it, is there is a comfort level there. People are more comfortable standing up in an aisle in a room full of people without all of this than they might be to stand up, come here, in front of that mic, figure out that equipment.
Yeah, and I'd like to say that really this, for me, is for selfish reasons, because I want to hear from, I understand that everyone can go to YouTube and watch this meeting the following day. I want to hear from the community. there's always something I hear from someone who presents that is going to affect my decision on this. There's no doubt about it. So the more people I can hear from, the better. And if we have to go out to the community, that's how we're going to have to do it, in my opinion. I am surprised at the little bit of feedback, other than Save Wrightstown Facebook page, Save Rolling Hills Facebook page. Other than a few emails, I haven't heard much more. So I'd really like to be able to reach out to the community and get that information.
And I'm going to defend your position, and I'm going to make the plea now that when we hold these meetings, if we hold them somewhere else, tell everybody to come, because I want Mark, and I'm picking. I want to represent the money well. I don't want to get there and find 6 people. So we want a lot of people.
But that's telling too, Jared.
Yeah, well,
because if we only have 6 people, then there really isn't passion in the community to address the issue, and that's okay too.
So we have 2 dates right now. I think we're going to look at north and south. We'll get information out to the board. I wanted to let Mr. Cox say something and Mr. Klein say something.
Just when you're north and south, you understand that you're on the stage. You are way far removed from the people that are talking. It may be a comfortable setting for you, but just we've sat there once before, some of us, so you understand there's a big pit and there's a big audience there, and it's a less.
And the board doesn't communicate with each other.
Because you're straight.
Right, I just want you to know when you're there.
Now we're straight across the.
Unless you tell me something different, it's going to look and feel a little different. It's going to be more segmented from your audience than you are already.
Well, wait a minute. Can't we just arrange it different? And I don't want to get into the details here, but we don't need a table in front of us. Can't we have a semicircle of chairs and have it?
You can, but you're still on the stage. There's no way to move the chairs. Okay.
I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
But we can still be in a semicircle.
No problem.
We don't need a dais in front of us, right?
Can you do it in the gym and put us on the floor?
Could we do it in the cafeterias?
I need power.
Okay, we will get some arrangements out to everybody, and we're going to move on. We still have a full agenda to go to. I did want to let Mr. Cox make his one comment.
It's good, I made it.
Oh, he's made it. I didn't hear it, but okay. So we're going to reopen public comment. Ideally, the thought was in the beginning that this public comment would be geared towards the motions that we have, but I fully understand that there may be people in the audience who obviously want to do what we usually do at the end of a board meeting. So I'm going to open public comment. I'm going to ask a couple things. One, please do keep your comments to 3 minutes, or close. If there's only a couple people want to talk is not a concern. But if a lot of people do want to speak, I would definitely ask for that. And the other thing is, after you're done, if you could step away from the mic and then sign the sheet so that the next person could come and start talking. I'm just in the interest of keeping people moving.
Can we ask one more request?
Yes.
Which is that if you speak, and this is my thought, if you're speaking now, then we will have another public comment at the end, but if you're speaking now, to speak again at the same topic on the last closing will be a little redundant. So either speak now or then on the topic, but not both places.
May I ask one question before this happens? I know that's not like the call, but is this going to be discussed anymore tonight? The capital plan?
So,
I'm sorry.
yes, it's unusual, but so I will give you my opinion and others can disagree. It's not on the agenda to be discussed anymore. That doesn't prevent a board member from at any time having a thought occur to them or say, I want this discussed, or so I would be remiss if I guaranteed you that I can guarantee these 9 people won't say anything else about it, but it's 9:45 and we have an agenda to get through, so it's not likely.
It is listed under board topics.
Oh, well, it should not be. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Yes, I thought we took that off. My bad. Thank you.
Anybody intend to speak about it anymore tonight at this point?
Yeah.
Process.
Okay.
You ready?
Please begin.
Yes. My name is Heather Oberhaum from Wrightstown, and I apologize. I just started looking into this information. I didn't intend to speak tonight, but as the discussion progressed, I just wanted to give you what I remember, which I'm 40 with 3 kids, so take that as what I remember. I wanted to speak to the enrollment and the sort of life cycle of the neighborhoods, and you often see that as a realtor. We see that there's a natural neighborhood turnover. Wrightstown community is an exceptionally old community. About 4% and this information was from Realtors Property Resource. It's deemed reliable but not guaranteed. But about 4% of our population have owned their homes for 40-plus years. Another 6% of our homeowners have owned their homes from 30 to 40 years. And then 10% of our population have owned their homes from 20 to 30 years. Again, that's from memory. I promise I will get you the exact stats. But so we're talking about 20% of our population have owned their homes for 20 or more years. I want to pull out how many of those homes are 3 bedrooms plus. In contrast, and again, I wasn't focused on these numbers, but I believe Newtown Township, only 1% of their properties have been owned 40-plus years. And then I think it's about 4% from 30 to 40 years, and then we have a big balloon of like 15%. So they both equal out to 20%, 20 years or older, but we have a significantly higher percentage of our properties that have been owned for 30 years and 40 years plus. So just in terms of that, that neighborhood progression, you're going to see those people move out, and we're going to backfill them. Now, people move into 3-bedroom plus homes in Wrightstown for the school district. We don't have the sort of condos with the 2-bedroom and 1-bedroom condos, so these are going to be predominantly family homes where people are going to move in with children. So in terms of stabilization of our enrollment, I think that Wrightstown is probably an extremely stable number, and if anything, we might see some increase in those numbers. I don't want to, I'm not a Schrader, I don't have that software, but just in terms of the population and how long they've owned their homes, that's what I found, the data that I found. Like I said, I promise I'll get it to you in the next meeting. I really wasn't expecting to talk, so I haven't analyzed it, and it's from memory, but in terms of the discussion that we were having and Mr. Klein's comments in terms of the enrollment, I just wanted to offer that out to you. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're not controlling it.
If you could sign.
You're not controlling it, he's controlling it.
If you could just sign.
We already did, we already said
Okay,
it.
great, perfect, thank you.
We're ahead of it. I'm going to try to do 3 minutes. Okay. I, for one, am not surprised at the administration's recommendation because it's pretty consistent with what I read in recommendation 1. I've lost count of how many times I've read these. It was probably after the 3rd time that I think I really started to understand them. But recommendation 1 said 3 years you can close Rolling Hills only after you build out Hillcrest, and in 2020, you close Wrightstown only after you build out more classrooms to fit those kids in at Richboro Elementary School. So it's not surprising at all, I don't think, this recommendation. I'm just speaking as a parent. It's just as a not just a Wrightstown parent. I'm not just a Wrightstown parent. I'm a Council Rock parent. I don't think that the school board should be afraid of redistricting, but I think it makes a heck of a lot of sense if you're going to fix the middle school, so you kind of have some parity at the middle school and high school level. You can't get it right now at the elementary level because you got all these different sized schools, so you just can't do that with the buildings that you have. But once you have parity at the middle school and the high school level, then that would be a great time to look at the elementary schools. Is enrollment stabilizing? Is it going down? What's happening with it? And mix up north and south. Say, where should those lines be so that we're feeding the right number of kids to our new middle school and our redone other middle school and to our high schools? That makes a lot of sense. I kind of like the idea of the K through 3, 4 through 6. I think Springfield School District in Montgomery does that. Like, there's just a school for 7th graders, stuff like that. I think that's actually an innovative idea and something that would be worth looking at. I want to speak about Wrightstown efficiency. We don't have like 17 kids classrooms there except the afternoon kindergarten. We just don't. We're very stable, and I think we're pretty efficient. I think that this conversation continues because I agree with what was said, that the administration spoke, it's the board that decides, and we're coming to talk, and I think more of us are going to keep coming to talk. We're encouraging as many people to come as we can. I don't think we should be afraid to look at this issue in 2 to 3 years. When I first heard of this, I thought, well, if it makes sense to close Wrightstown, I will be so sad. But when I started reading the recommendations, I was like, but there's not enough room. I mean, I think it's pretty clear there's not enough room. It's in recommendation 1. That you don't have enough space. So look at it every couple years. Why wouldn't you look at it every couple years? If it means there's road signs on the side of the road, okay, that's just an involved community. That's good. The Schrader analysis, the Schrader report gives a really good explanation of why you use 90% capacity. It's a logistical issue. It explains it really well. I suggest revisiting that. I'm concerned about the cost to build a new Newtown Middle School. More on that later because I got 9 seconds left. And, change. There was a comment earlier I just thought I wanted to respond to, change benefiting our kids. I feel like our kids go through a lot of change. Uprooting kids out of schools for no good reason doesn't benefit them. If children do need to be moved to new schools later on, if enrollment does decline, then we manage that change. But just moving schools to create change, to give kids experience of change, I'm not buying that one. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Adrienne Vance. I'm here for Wrightstown again. The last speaker addressed some of my points, so that made my life a little easier. I'm happy with the dialogue that has occurred this evening. I think it's been a lot more positive than some of the past meetings that we have had. But I am disappointed with the comment from Ms. Sexton about maybe the community can have buying the school as our new home. I kind of thought that was inappropriate because you can see that the school does mean a lot to our community. But aside from that, relocating the district, yes, I agree with the last one. We need to start at the top and move down. That seems practical with the renovations of the middle schools and the high schools and changing that rezoning. But we need to consider, too, that our area here, Council Rock, is not set up in Philadelphia where we have the school blocks and everything's in a grid pattern. There are homes all over. We're pulling all the way from Wycombe and all the way down towards Street Road. There is a huge distance there, and just the geographical locations, we can't clearly cut everything and have a reasonable driving distance for everyone. By redistricting everything, we need to consider, too, the expense that we're going to incur from increased transportation, increased bus maintenance, increasing gas. We know the gas prices aren't going to go down in the future. They continue to rise. Not to mention we have to take into consideration that the students will be on the bus longer, which will increase the chance of accidents, their risk for accidents. Not to mention it'll cut in their time for studying. They're on the bus riding around. They're not home doing their homework. They're not going to have the opportunity to enroll in those extra enrichment activities and sports and stuff because now, instead of a 5-minute bus ride, they have a 25-minute bus ride. They're going to have to stay up later to complete the work because it's taken longer to get home from school. Then they'll have to get up earlier to go to school to catch the same bus for the longer ride. So we need to be reasonable when we're rezoning these schools, if that is a consideration that we do. And in some areas we do need to do that, but we need to consider the other additional expenses and costs and the tolls that it's actually taking on the parents and the families in addition to this. And I think that's something that sometimes we overlook. You know, we think, okay, if we move things around to find that perfect number, that'll be great. But with every move you make, there's the consequences and results. And that's part of something that we need to consider. Thank you.
Hi, Joanne Hinton from Richboro. I just have a couple points based on your conversations. The first is, it is a hard decision about the bricks and mortar of the schools, but regardless, it appears to me that redistricting does need to occur. If Goodnow and Newtown are really not at capacity, and South Finestone is relatively even in population and at ultra capacity, and you have kids who live in Newtown going to South Finestone, for example, it seems to be a no-brainer that redistricting does need to occur. And a while ago, I did a little bit of a study, just so you know, that other than South Finestone, every school in the district is within 7 miles of every other school in the district. So you're not really talking about driving 20 miles away. I live in Richboro. I pass south every day. Well, I would if my son wasn't driving, to take him to north. So all these schools are fairly close together. I really, you know, again, I'm glad I'm not in your seats as far as Wrightstown's concerned, but it seems to me that if you have a zero modular policy, can you have a zero modular policy and have Wrightstown exist? That's something that you guys are going to have to decide, because if you have 5 modulars that are being used and you took them away, would you be able to fit everybody into Wrightstown Elementary? And I don't know the answer to that. The high school population, a little pet peeve of mine. North is underutilized, south is certainly close to whatever study you might have in terms of the population there. I have a kid who has 32 kids in one AP class. I'm really not happy. The 18 kids in the other AP class, I'm okay with that. And I think one of the issues is that when you have a school that's underpopulated and a school that's overpopulated, you lose classes because you can't fill them. You lose classes because you don't have classrooms for them. Redistrict north and south, and if you have to wait the 4 years it's going to take you to get through with Newtown Middle School, so be it. But redistricting shouldn't be so scary for people. You talk about a 5-year plan. If you have a plan, it doesn't mean you can't change it. I think it's great that you're thinking of having a plan. Have a plan. And finally, I, for one, appreciate the fact that I think you guys did get the message out. I've been to several different controversial topic discussions that you guys have had. Sadly, unless it affects me and affects my child, I don't go. And it seems to be a little bit pervasive in the district. And so until you say nobody from Welsh or Churchville or Hillcrest are here, that's because as far as they're concerned, it doesn't affect them. It's sad but true. Anyway, I thank you for all your good work.
Hi. Just wanted to make some observations about the discussion. I'm disappointed in the recommendations that came forth. I feel to a certain degree that the work of the committees was somewhat dissed, in terms of, when you look at the enrollments and you look at the allocation of kids, either by class size or by this capacity thing, or by some other parameter, it's clear that if the enrollment of the district is declining, and you're getting rid of modules without any problems, then it's going to you have to look at that. And I think that, as Mrs. Sexton said, the district has a computer system, some kind of system, I assume it's computerized, that allows you to look at different types of redistricting. And I assume you can do that based on your capacity, based on class size, and based on a total district redistricting, total school district redistricting. And I think I'm disappointed that the board members aren't asking for those models to be brought forward, rather than a PowerPoint graphic. With all deference, Mr. Klein, I think a PowerPoint graphic with a couple arrows, we've got a lot more sophistication than that, and I think we should be using it. And I'm disappointed that the board members aren't demanding that those models be brought forth, so that you can look at this thing and work from facts and not just from eyeballing stuff and just moving a couple dozen kids one way or the other. One of the recommendations was not to sell Twining and not to sell the house tract. I can somewhat see not selling Twining if you're not going to do anything else, because you've got some important functions up there with food service in your shops. I don't understand the rationale for not immediately selling the house tract, unless you plan on building another school out there. Is anybody, show of hands, anybody planning on pushing for a school at the house tract? I didn't think so. All right. So I can't imagine why that's not on the market. And in deference to my chair lady, I was either asleep or missed the discussion around Mr. Grupp's model of having school partners or school buddies, whatever you call it. And I think that that's another thing that should be modeled, so that if you have your elementaries that are K through 3 and 4 through 6, and you partner them up, either in 2s or 3s, I think it gives you another way to look at things. And I think you could do the same thing with the middle school and the high school. Why can't you have North be 9 and 10 and South be 11 and 12, or vice versa, and have one school? Same thing with the middle schools. Finally, I know I'm over my time, but I'll say that the committee members did visit the elementary schools. I was on that committee, and I'm glad that there's people here. I'm sad that a lot of the committee people aren't here yet, but I think a lot of them are burned out because they put in inordinate amount of time looking at this stuff. And we did look at the alternative education programs. We did look at shipping and receiving. We looked at the shops. We looked at the HR stuff. We looked at everything I could think of in terms of facilities. So thank you for your time.
Mr. McGill, I just want to be clear. There was no intent to diss any of the committees, and in fact, the recommendation that I put up there actually mirrors one of the committee's recommendations. I want to be clear. I am very, very careful that the work that the committees did was fantastic. I don't want that to appear in any way like I didn't respect that work.
Well, that might be, you know, I'm telling you what my takeaway was from it. Okay, I felt that we were put, you know, we put pressure on ourselves, and you know, we responded to pressure from the board and from the staff to get things done, and we came back with these things, and all of a sudden it's like the recommendations are to do very little for the next several years.
Furthest from that, it mirrors one of the committees. You weren't going to get all three committees synthesized in one. Their recommendations were too different.
Yeah, I'm just telling you how it felt.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
Hi, Jason Funk from Wrightstown. I just want to start off and say I appreciate everything that the committees did. I think it's great that we have volunteers in the community that can do that. The one thing, though, I find strange, though, is that he mentioned almost in the beginning that, you know, we need to be basing this on facts, and I believe by looking at what Mr. Klein presented tonight that enrollment is in fact not declining. It has increased. So you say you want to deal with facts, but you're basically lying. So with that in mind, the other thing I found interesting, again, I think Mr. Klein was a great presentation. Someone did point out that, yeah, we only saw an increase of 17, but in my mind, that's not the big issue here. I think, I'm assuming that the school district has used this PEL study to kind of come up with what they need to do. But if I'm not, and I may have the numbers wrong, and Mr. Klein, perhaps you can fill me in here, but I believe that was at least 100 off of what they assumed it would be at this point. So that's a big difference. And you know, just like any model, you put garbage in, you get garbage out. So you know, take that as you may. The other thing too is, you know, trends have to start somewhere. And you know, we can see, you turn on the news when you come home at night, unemployment is dropping, stock market is at all-time historical levels for the S&P and the Dow. Housing market's on the move, rightfully so. We're seeing lower unemployment, we're seeing stock markets, people are feeling a little better about themselves. So all these points tend to show that this could very well be the beginning of a trend upward in our enrollment. And does it make sense, understanding and seeing those numbers that were presented tonight, to just say, we need to close a school? I don't think it does. I think it's very short-sighted. So, the other thing too is there was a point about zoning in places like Wrightstown that it just doesn't allow for new homes to be built. Completely untrue. If you understood zoning, you would realize that. We have numerous lots within Wrightstown that are not only 1 acre lots, but half-acre lots, that if we continue to see the economy doing as it is, there will be development pressure on those lots. And we as a community would love to keep those as open space, but we don't have the money to purchase those lots. So if people want to sell those lots and there's development pressure, they will be sold. And I promise you, they will be developed. And there's more students into your district. And then another thing too, and I'll end with this because I thought it was kind of ridiculous too, the point about buying the township, the township buying the school district, the Wrightstown Elementary. Considering the township gave that property to the school district, perhaps the school district, if they close it, can give it back to the township. Thank you.
Holly Springle, Wrightstown. I wanted to talk to you about the 90%. This is not specifically about Wrightstown at all. I worked for the school district for several years. I subbed in the multi-disabilities room for a number of years over at Newtown, and I guess you have all been in there, but if you haven't, you have to understand how rooms are used. At the time I was there, I believe there were 8 children from roughly, first grade up through sixth. 2 were in wheelchairs. Each one of them had an individual TA, and there were 2 teachers in the room. So it was a large room, but I mean, those 8 kids and 12 adults needed space. You've got, there are no desks. So some of these rooms are not your typical sit down at a desk and pick up your pencil and sit in your chair rooms. You need space. And I think at one point it's possible that Newtown actually ended up with 3 rooms being used for that. I worked for the Title I program. Now the first year I was very short time. I shared space with the reading specialist, the kindergarten, first grade reading specialist. There were no rooms available. This was, 2002, 3, and 4, I was at Newtown. They had to clear out one of the closets so that we could do reading with kindergartners and first graders. The next year, amazingly, a classroom became available, and at that point, that's good. I was 0.8, so I used it virtually all day. We shared it with the ELL teacher who came in, and the reading specialist. The next year, it was so tight, and we're talking just a 3-year span. We had to clear out the copier room. We had to move all the copiers into spaces, and that was the room we used. But there was also a new teacher, and she found it uncomfortable, so I ended up moving to the computer closet. And I wasn't just doing push-in, which is when I would go into a room. I would take kids out of the classroom, and the 3 or 4 of us would go into the computer closet. And that was where I taught reading. So the problem with trying to get yourselves at a really high level is all of a sudden you got kids reading in computer closets. And it shouldn't be that way in Council Rock. Thanks.
Hello, I'm Heather Blossman. I swore to myself I was not going to talk tonight. I was going to sit and listen, and here I am. So, for those of you who don't know, I was involved with Plan 3. And I really, I want to say that this is an incredibly intimidating room. It just is. It takes a lot of guts to walk up to this podium and stand. And I've done it a few times now, and I still shake like a leaf. So I realize that people who don't get used to coming up here and standing up here, it takes a lot to just get up out of your chair and come up here. And I feel like even for your meetings, there's some materials that I feel like you should have a table. You should be laying out papers. You should be looking at things. That's what we did in the planning committee, and mull things over. I feel like this is somewhat, it's really hard to get, I think, the work that has to be done. But I want to say, because Jerry Grupp mentioned, did we even look at what he sent us? And we did.
I didn't say, did you ever?
Well, we did. I just wanted you to know that we looked at it. And I know it's like not a back and forth, which is very weird for me, so I'm sorry to address you directly, but we did look at that. And one of the things about Council Rock, we keep talking about how can we switch up schools? Can we have a school that's K to 2? Can we have a high school that's 9 to 10 and 11 to 12? And one of the things that we kept talking about in our planning committee was what makes Council Rock great? What makes us Council Rock? What makes us better? I didn't want to hear about school districts that really didn't have the caliber that we felt. Maybe it's looking through our nose, Patty, I don't know, but we tried to think of what made us great, and some of it is these small schools that sit and are supported by a community. We talked about technology. One of the things we have never heard is how much money are we trying to save? What are we trying to purchase? Is there a best case scenario of technology that we know we need $10 million to buy that for our schools? Our PTOs raised $40,000 almost every year. We bought smart boards for every classroom. We bought iPads and iPad chargers, and 20 of them for our school at Richboro, and gave them to the school district. This is our community supporting technology and raising the bar in our schools. And I feel like to blow things up in such an intense way, which really feels like there's this pull of do the least and do the most. and blowing everything up, maybe we'll take that community support, which is financial, which is emotional, which is athletics, lots of other things are involved than just 25 or 30 kids in a classroom. Had to say that. Okay. What else did I want to say? So we don't know what kind of money we're trying to raise here. I feel like maybe that's the problem with what to do is what are you trying to gain? And we haven't really been able to run those numbers. I don't even know if it's possible. So that's why your plan, we looked at it and thought it kind of blows everything up and is really hard to manage. It was hard to even articulate it in our brain. I also wanted the mom from the Achieve program to know that your comments were fabulous. We went and looked at the Achieve program. I'm a physical therapist myself too, and we looked at that program. I know John Englehart, fabulous program, and we didn't hear what you said. What you said tonight changes the way I feel about just picking up that program and moving it. There are very special things that you said, and I'm glad I came tonight even just to hear what you had to say about that program. So I really look forward to what you guys come up with. Thank you for listening.
Newtown, Nancy Carroll, Newtown Borough. I didn't know Heather was going to go before me, but I was going to start with complimenting her as a leader of the community group because we spent an incredible amount of time on busing. We spent 4 meetings. We sent endless questions to Jack Panera. He answered them, to us. He came and met with us. We re-questioned him, and we found out more about busing than I think anybody could possibly even think they would learn. And we too, when we looked at Wrightstown, it's 4 miles from Newtown, and it's a 9-minute drive. So anybody who goes to Wrightstown, the longest the additional drive would be 9 minutes. And some kids will even be closer. And our group decided that the people who would bear the worst of that drive would be those that lived in Northampton. And it was to that consideration that we decided that maybe they would be better off because they would be the farthest away from Newtown. So we did take all those things. Jack gave us incredible amount of things of how we could save money on busing. He is a wonderful leader. I'm sorry to hear that he's retiring. We also had somebody who was in touch with all the Achieve, with the parents from the Achieve, and we learned and we saw videos about the Achieve program, and we didn't hear what this mother had to say tonight, but we did take them into consideration. Our group did not know about Jerry Grubb's plan and did not look at it, after we split the second time around. And then for many people, the deciding things were not whether school was small or little, but what was the decline in enrollment, how are we going to afford $132 million worth of capital improvements, how are we going to take off trailers, and how are we going to get kids more access to technology. In tonight's presentation, what was left out were the numbers for Newtown and Goodnow, the 100% numbers. They were given for the Southern Division, but not for the Northern Division on the slide. And Goodnow is 920, and Newtown Elementary is, I have this right here, is 870. So, and what I think the public also needs to know is how much some of these schools have gone down since their peak, and also how much they're down from the 100. North is down 655 students from what Schrader said is 100. Holland Middle is down 248 from what Schrader said, but they're down 721 from their peak. Goodnow is down 147 from the 100% capacity. Holland Elementary is down 204 students from the Schrader 100. We have a lot of schools that have gone down way more than other schools, and that is, I think, a problem. But I would like the district to put on the web the busing map for the elementary schools. And I think that once people see that, they'll see that it looks like something that was poorly gerrymandered by 2 political parties that each had 50% of the vote. Because you have Hillcrest, that it's surrounded by people who go to Holland, then you have other people, the Hillcrest, cross over the Holland to go to Hillcrest. You have Goodnow, then you have this little sliver of Newtown Elementary, and then beyond that is some more Goodnow people. It's, from a busing standpoint, the one thing that Jack said is we'd be better off if we had more contiguous areas as far as busing goes. My time is up, but I thank you so much.
Jane Magny, Wrightstown Township. I'd like to address the sale of the house tract. That 72 acres is really presently banked for any future expansion of Council Rock, and as you know, land's only going to become more expensive if you decide to get rid of it. And sometime in the future it's needed. Plus, my understanding is it's paid for, nearly paid for, so in reality it's not costing the residents of Council Rock any money at this point. Also, the house tract would more than likely be bought by a developer, and it has the potential of adding 72 homes. Now, if you think of that as perhaps 2 children per home, that would add another 144 children to Council Rock. These houses, as I mentioned before, are, they don't generate the taxes, Council Rock taxes, to cover the cost of educating those students. The rest of the residents of Council Rock pay that extra cost. So think hard about selling the Howe tract. Thank you.
Anyone else? So we're going to move on.
Amy McIntyre with Newtown. I'm just going to say that for someone very new to attending Board of Education meetings, to hear from many Board of Education members that they're disappointed that their superintendent doesn't feel it's appropriate to close elementary schools is a little disheartening. I would like to say that administration did suggest doing some pretty humongous projects for the district. It's hardly nothing. They addressed the biggest cost savings, closing Richboro Middle School. So when we are talking about concerns for the taxpayers, that was addressed to the best that we can currently. It is not free for the district to close Wrightstown Elementary School. It will cost approximately $10 million to get other elementary schools ready to accept those children, and those savings will not be realized for at least 10 years. So it's not about the taxes, and when, this is the pendulum swing. It's 17 students this year. It's turning around. I think the 5-year plan should definitely include sitting and watching enrollment go up and thanking our lucky stars that we didn't close an elementary school. And as far as the presentation being simple, there's no reason to complicate it. The kids don't fit. So keep it simple. They don't fit. If we're forcing the issue of closing the school right now, you can make it look as tricky as you want. It's not going to work. So I was really excited to hear administration's suggestions, and my friend next to me said, he's disappointed, you're disappointed, and so am I. I thought it was a great recommendation, and I would love to see what I thought all along, which is that enrollment is going to increase, and we'll have the room in our excellent schools to accommodate these new kids in my neighborhood alone. I've lived there since '09. About 10 homes at least have sold to families with children not yet in the district. So it's happening all over. Anecdata galore of that happening even amongst many of you board members in your neighborhoods. So, thanks.
Hi, my name is Gina Yarnell, and I am one of the few people here from Rolling Hills this evening. I thought it was about time you heard from somebody from Rolling Hills. I am not the typical Rolling Hills parent. I have been a Rolling Hills parent for 17 years, and I still have 4 more years to go. I have 2 that have already graduated from Council Rock South. I have 1 that's in Council Rock South, and I have a 2nd grader. So I have a lot invested in Rolling Hills, and I know you guys have a very hard decision to make, but there are 2 parts to your decision. Putting aside the budget By being an elected official, we have entrusted you to make the best decision in the best interest of our children. And closing Rolling Hills Elementary by no means is in the best interest of our children. As far as change, our children have their whole lives to experience change. Isn't that what middle school, high school, and college, and anything else in their future should entail? There's lots of change in there. Children at the younger school ages also need stability and a place to plant some roots. My family has already experienced change from Rolling Hills. We were redistricted from Holland Middle School to Richboro Middle School. And just on a side note of that, I can tell you when Mr. Klein did have a meeting at Rolling Hills, there was a very big turnout of parents when they were redistricting our children. So I think that's a good idea. You are looking to change our community again. We've already had that redistricting, so you're kind of targeting, for lack of a better word, Rolling Hills again. And there is not enough room at one particular school from what I saw from the chart, so you're going to be dividing our school again. And then we are also going to be separating them when it comes to high school. So these children that are currently there that have started together will not end up together. That's a lot of change for one school to have. And as far as redistricting, I guess I have some personal, things with that. I don't quite know where my development would fall in there, but I've been a South parent for 3 kids. I really would like to stay being a South parent. And then a quick decision does not really seem in the best interest of anybody here. It doesn't seem like, you have all your questions answered, so I urge you not to rush into making your decision. As far as technology, I know somebody else mentioned Home and School. I was a very active and still pretty active member of Home and School for all my years at Rolling Hills. I know last year through a readathon, our school raised over $24,000 to put in a new playground equipment. So I know there's ways for the community to come together and raise money that could help for our technology. I know our parents will come together. We are a Council Rock community, so I just really urge you to please look at what you're doing and please don't close Rolling Hills. Thank you.
Good evening, Jim Tyron, Wrightstown. There's been a lot of topics covered here. I think everybody here is doing a great job, from the board to the folks that have participated in the studies. I think you are all to be commended. And we moved to Wrightstown 2 years ago to be a part of the Council Rock School District, and more specifically to be a part of Wrightstown Elementary. And everybody has a lot of passion here, and it's what's made this place great. Everyone here has done a lot of good work. I would encourage you to keep doing that good work. And I'm impressed with the facts that were produced today by Mr. Klein. I think there's a lot of intelligence and relevance to the recommendations that were made. So I know you have some difficult decisions to make, but I would say the facts are pretty clear, and I would encourage you to keep doing the good job you're doing. I would encourage you to keep the Wrightstown and other elementary schools open. I think that waiting provides you time to look at the enrollment. Things have changed just in the couple years that we've lived here. My children are currently in the school, but there are plenty of kids in our neighborhood that have not been in the school yet, but will be soon. So I think what you're going to see is closing elementary schools is going to make it tough for the other schools, increasing past 90% and beyond. So I would just say I'd like to thank everybody here for what you're doing. Keep up the good work. Long hours. God, this is only my second meeting and I'm already burnt out, but I appreciate what everybody's doing, and I would encourage you to keep the schools open. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to move on to our items for board approval. Mr. Wiley, can you take item number 1?
Sure. I move to approve the retainer. I move to approve the retainer agreement with Mr. Fred D'Angelo as contained in the attachment to this agenda.
Second. Thank you.
Discussion?
Mr. Cox, did you review this contract for the board?
I did. I I understood that Mr. Abramson had some concerns about it, and I understood that you did as well. I wasn't asked to change anything, so I was reluctant to do so unless the board as a whole wanted me to do so. If I were to make changes, I would eliminate, it's a little heavy-handed, I would say. And I would eliminate the requirement that the district waive conflicts of interest in advance. I think that's a bit heavy-handed. And I would delete a provision which prevents the district from getting documents from the law firm if the law firm asserts that the district has breached its obligations under the agreement. I also would typically add a termination for convenience provision, but that's already built into the rules of professional conduct that will govern this attorney's representation of the district in labor negotiations, so that's perhaps superfluous. But I would, if asked, delete that advance waiver of conflict, and I would delete the nasty provision that allows them to hold back documents if they assert the district has breached its obligations under the agreement. So take those comments for what they're worth and build them into your discussion. That's what I would recommend.
Thank you, Mr. Cox. I am not going to vote in approval of this contract. This is not a surprise to anybody. As this couple issues I have. One is, if this is, I have a concern with this representation for the district, that this representation will represent the attorney's position more so than the board's position. And I think that's represented here in the way the contract came across. This contract was decidedly one-sided coming from the law firm. The representations here, the advance waiver, just so we're all clear what this is, a large issue in law practice today is that when someone presents something to an attorney and asks for counsel or advice or to contract with that, is that that attorney is obligated to disclose to the other party, to their current clients, if they've been approached by someone to do work for them. And it is the first party's right, the party who's already under agreement with them, to deny that law firm from practicing or conducting business with that second party. So that this firm came to the board and said, carte blanche, we want the right to not advise you when someone you may be at issue with comes to us and asks for our counsel, we want you to waive in advance without notice. I think that's ill-advised. And coming from an attorney that this board is now placing faith in to trust, I find that a difficult thing for me to swallow. The second part about it, you picked up on the advance waiver, on the termination. There's a reference here to the engagement of others at a lesser fee. There's no concept within this document about what those lesser fees would be. None. So we don't know. We do know that this attorney is going to charge $415 an hour to the board, which is approximately double what the other attorney was. Both attorneys are well qualified. I just don't see the representation by this attorney versus the other to be worth twice the price. You may argue, it may be argued, that this attorney may be able to achieve the results twice as fast. Would that were true, but I just find it objectionable. My biggest problem with this, from the outset, this was not my choice for an attorney, that I'm not going with this one, that I'm going to vote no, was predestined. But when I saw the terms in this contract, I just think this board is entering into an agreement to go with someone it's going to represent, who I believe will represent their own, I'm not going to say their own interests, because I don't believe that they will, I don't think they have a dog in this fight, but I think that they will, there's a term, imprimatur, their imprint, their feelings, their emotion, their decision on things. I think there will be a larger component of this than there has been in any of the contracts we've dealt with in many years. So for that reason, I'll be voting no on this contract.
Anyone else?
So are we going, our solicitor has made a recommendation to consider changing this. So what, are we voting on this existing agreement?
We are right now until someone suggested something else.
Well, someone, who made
You can say, you know, we can change the motion to under solicitor's review. I personally would be good with that, but
Yeah, I'd like to take a look at that.
But I'm just, it's up for, I mean, I don't know how you feel about it,
Right, well,
so.
that's, those changes that make this contract more palatable to you as our attorney, and I'm good with this if the changes are made.
Can I ask a question about the proposed change or the rationale for, why they may have done it the way they do? So I haven't looked, but I assume it's a pretty big law firm. And I don't know what's involved in tracking all of the interactions in that firm and all of its partners and other lawyers. And so is there a component of that? Does this tend to happen more with big firms than small firms? And then even with this in place, there are rules about conflicts that they have to. No, we've waived notice, but they can't. Aren't there still rules about conflicts? They represent that they have some policies and procedures in place, but there's there are legal standards.
There are. But first of all, the size of the law firm doesn't have any bearing on its obligation to disclose a conflict in the first place. So the biggest law firm in the world has the same obligation to disclose to its client a conflict of interest as a single person shop. So that's not that's not part of the equation. What's unique about this engagement letter is that they're saying, because they're a relatively large firm, they're essentially saying there is a higher likelihood of a potential conflict. And what they're saying is, if there is a conflict of interest, but it's a conflict of interest under the rules, but it's not related to the matter for which you've engaged us, you're agreeing in advance to waive that conflict. So if they had a separate client who wanted to bring a lawsuit against the school district that was unrelated to the labor negotiations, slip and fall, say, the district is saying in advance that it won't object to that conflict of interest, and that the law firm could pursue that lawsuit. So that's what this is saying, and it's it may be a standard provision for this law firm and in these types of matters, but it's certainly not a universal provision that you see, and as you can see, you're waiving perhaps a certain right that you have in advance.
Is it possible there's already a conflict, or would they have to advise us of that?
They would have to advise you of that.
I deal with one of the largest law firms in the world professionally, and we engaged them about a topic about a client, and their first comment to us was, hold on, we have to contact our conflict department. They have a group set aside who just runs through their list of clients to check what they have to do.
Is this substantially different from the contract we signed with this gentleman before?
We didn't have a contract before, did we?
I don't know that.
I don't know if it is or not.
So at this point, let me just make sure I understand. Who made the first? You? I did. Are you amending your motion to include solicitor? Well, I'm still against it. I want to make sure we do right.
I'm happy to amend my motion to include solicitor review.
Who seconded?
I did.
Are you willing?
Yeah, I'm fine, but I'm even okay with it the way it is, but I'll second your amendment.
Okay.
But I just want to be clear that what I'm hearing from council is that you want to remove the advance waiver of conflicts of interest altogether?
Yes, I struck out that paragraph, and then I removed the last sentence of the document procedures paragraph, which you can see there.
And you would add a termination, or you thought that was redundant with professional practice?
For convenience, I typically would, but again, I included in my engagement letters to clients, I think it's fair to include, but it's redundant because a client under the rules always has the right to terminate their attorney, so it's superfluous.
And this doesn't discuss, do attorneys typically, I imagine it's covered by standards, they bill in 1/10 of an hour or quarter hour? What's the standard for billing? Because that's not described here either. So is that governed by standard or corporate practice?
It's the firm's, this law firm's practice.
So I don't know if this firm charges on the decimal hour, on a tenth of an hour, or on whole hours or quarter hours or any part thereof. And at $415 an hour, it's $100 per 15 minutes. That's something I'd like to think the board would want to know.
Comments?
So the motion is to amend it to
Subject to
include
solicitor
all the
review.
comments from the solicitor, correct?
Correct. The current motion on the table is this contract with the solicitors' corrections. The only outstanding point I heard from Mr. Grupp was decimals of an hour were not.
Billing principles, yeah.
Yeah.
Mr. Cox, would you include, do you typically, in your review, would that be something you would include, or you'd leave that, you'd be silent on it?
No, I mean, that's more of a business decision for the board, I mean, because the board can terminate the engagement at any time. So if it doesn't like the way it's being charged or the amounts it's being charged, it can cut its losses. So that seems fair enough to me. And again, you know, the board could lawfully and in good faith approve the contract the way it is, with the provisions I deleted. They're not unlawful. They're just a bit heavy-handed, I would say.
In professional practice, is the billing at the hourly rate inclusive of travel time or not inclusive of travel time for the attorney?
Typically, the hourly rate is charged for travel time.
Okay, the other attorney was not, as I recall, in his proposal.
But again, that's a business decision.
I understand, I'm asking you from the professional experience as an attorney. I'm asking the board, is that a term that you would want to worry about? I don't know. This person is traveling from where? Where is their office?
Philadelphia.
Philadelphia. So are we willing to pay? And the person lives locally or in Philadelphia? So are we willing to pay the hour and a half each way? So are we willing to pay $600 to have that person come to a meeting plus the cost of being at a meeting? Just want to ask.
Yeah, I am.
Okay. You wouldn't want to exclude it. You wouldn't want to ask that the contract be amended to exclude that, to exclude travel time.
For me, overall, if the costs start being too much, I'm going to terminate the relationship. It seems to me that it needs to be reasonable. He's got many other clients in this area. It could take him 15 minutes to get here. It could take him an hour to get here. He's got to have a fair wage. If it becomes unreasonable, then I'm going to have a problem.
$4.15 is a pretty fair wage.
I understand you don't care for him, Mr. Grupp. I am in favor of voting for this law firm. I took into consideration in making that judgment the price that it was charging. A year ago, I felt differently, and we hired him anyway a year ago. So, when I was a no, we got him, and now I'm, whatever. That's my opinion.
I just want to be on record with my opposition.
I would like some clarification of the billable hours, how that's broken down. That's the only other thing I would ask for. If it's every 6 minutes, if it's every 15 minutes.
You're going to pay for every minute,
I know, but
one way or the other.
But do you pay if you call him for 15 minutes? Does he bill you an hour?
I would imagine 15 minutes, but I'll say this to
I
you,
don't know.
Jerry. We interviewed, we picked an attorney. This is what he wants. You can change it. This is what he'll get. It's not just what he wants.
Yeah.
This is what he will get from any school system in Bucks County today. Probably anywhere, maybe other places more. So this is what this is what this man's fee calls for. Maybe he will meet twice, where the other attorney will meet 6 times. So the question is not just as easy as this many minutes and this is what it is. It is the person we're going to do business with to handle something that is the biggest cost factor we have. Out of our $212 million budget, this man is going to talk about what 80% of it costs. And so in that light, I want someone who has that kind of successful mojo. I'm hoping for that. Now, I don't know, because I think all of these attorneys have taken every board in Bucks County down a road too far. Central Bucks Agreement is going to drive us. They just agreed to something, what, 2.3?
It's 11 point something %.
2.38 for 4 years.
Right.
Our teachers are going to look at that. Our staff is going to look at that. So that was negotiated with the help of a big-time attorney. So I would say this. I like this man. I'm going to vote for this man. This is the man I want to do this for us. But it's not really them. It's all about us.
And this will be my final, I will try and make this my final comment on that. My point for this discussion and my concern with the reticence of this board to exert influence or ask for things of this attorney, even now in the negotiation with the attorney, I believe is foreshadowing of the structure of the negotiation going forward, that this person will come back, make a representation of the right thing to do to this board in the negotiation process, and this board, unwilling to challenge, unwilling to exert influence, as they are on the negotiation of the contract, will not serve the public well in its negotiations. That's my opinion, and that's why I'm making the case point here about how we handle even engaging the person represents the way that we're going to work with the person going forward. And it is an object lesson. I will lose. I know that the majority of the board will go with this, but it's an object lesson I want the board to understand and I want the public to understand. This is the tenor of our agreement with this person already, unwilling to challenge and request a change because it might be the right business practice.
We just agreed to make 2 substantive changes in that contract just right now. So what you're putting forward as what the other 8 of us are doing is something I don't agree with.
Would it make sense to see, I mean, is there a chance that he will say no to the changes that we're asking for?
Yes.
So would it make sense to table this until next week, send this back to the attorney for consideration and vote it next week, once we know that the changes are accepted?
It's no harm. It's no harm. It's our time, our dime. We're not doing anything between this week and next week regarding this that we need them. If that's what the board wants, I'm happy to do that.
Yeah, and I just want to be clear that we are checking in on the billing because we're using
Well, let's add that in.
I just want to make sure, because I didn't get a confirmation about that. These are public funds we're using. We don't know how they're breaking down the per hour rate. We don't know what the other non-lawyer professionals are going to be billed at. And if we have billing questions, it's hard to go back to them if we're...
You could email a list of those questions, then we'll make sure they get answered. So email us a list of those questions.
They've been asked here at the table tonight.
So that's the end of them.
No,
But I'm just saying, there might be more that you would want. We have to go back and get that information for next Thursday, so we have the
There's a billing
answer.
question. I want our finance department to be able to go to the attorney's office with an unambiguous
Okay, well, that's not what I thought you were asking, so my bad. I didn't know you were asking our business department to do that. I thought you were, really directing Mr. Klein, who's been our intermediary on this, to ask this attorney for some billing. So if I'm just saying, I'd rather get all the questions out before we come to next week and vote on it.
Wouldn't a firm of that size, Rob, have fairly articulated billing practice they could share with us?
Yes.
Okay.
There we go.
Yes. I mean, it's...
It is.
It's easy.
Yeah.
Just
And it should be fine. The fee schedule, it should be part of it. And I'm fully in support of hiring this gentleman. I just want to make sure that we can defend our billing if we need to.
Mr. Cox, you'll make that inquiry of Mr. D'Angelo?
I'm happy to.
Thank you.
While we're at it, though.
So let me make sure
Wait a second, Rob, let me add some things there. I appreciate that you made those changes, and there was a couple more that can tell me not to go for this agreement. There's the administrative expenses, that's on the top of page 2. Another concern I have is the document procedures. I think I spoke to you about that. If he's billing us for documents, I want to know that I can get those documents. And the other one is the use of us, or CRSD, on their website. I would like to have pre-approval.
I actually had a bit of an issue with that too, but I didn't want to be too heavy-handed. Is that normal that we're allowing a firm to use us as their advertising?
Yeah, we do that in a lot of the agreements that we sign. But as part of the agreement, that we're allowed to use Counts Rock they're allowed to use it as an endorsement. Aramark uses it on a regular basis, others do.
Well, even the brochure he used to present himself to us
Had other.
had other organizations with it. All right, formally, I'm going to make a motion to table.
I have a second.
Second.
Anyone object? Hey, I'm asking the secretary to table the motion.
With the notation that Mrs. Brooks and Mrs. McKesson are out of the room.
So let me just make sure I understand. I'm going to discuss the changes I've proposed. Mr. Abramson, I have a handle on your issues with respect to use of Council Rock's name and the district's entitlement to documents. Mr. Bialik, I think you had an issue with respect to attachment of a fee schedule.
Yeah,
Or
yeah.
someone
Billing
did.
procedures.
Billing procedures, because I know some attorneys that, well, if you talk to them for 2 minutes, they're going to bill you for 6, right?
Fair enough.
Okay, and I just want to know how we're paying this from.
Got it.
And the admin expenses.
Thank you.
Okay.
And if you could find out, as long as you're asking what his travel policies are.
Anybody else? Okay, Mrs. Sexton, can you do item number 2?
Sure. I move to approve the personnel actions as contained in the attachments to this agenda.
Second.
Comments?
Yeah. I would like to, there is an action here. It is a long-standing action, a process that the board has followed. And I don't mean to, and I'm not looking to cause us strife in the midst of this person's reliance on our past practice. But the practice of the district going forward is something I want to revisit. We have a practice here around uncompensated leave. And under this plan, I believe the real intention of uncompensated leave was to be, if you had to be engaged with your family, if you were on maternity or paternity leave long-term, possibly if you were doing something that was improving yourself as a educator or something. I don't believe it was the intention of uncompensated leave, or our intention, to allow people to use it to go out and take on other employment for up to 2 years, and if that doesn't work out, return to the Council Rock School District, have their position reinstated at the expense of some other staff member who we may have hired in the interim. So in the conversations with the administration, the question had been put to me about, but if this is a good person and they can come back to us, why wouldn't you do it? And in thinking about that, the answer is, if it's a good person and they want to come back, we could hire them back if we had an opening. I think it is potentially unfair for the persons who were hired after they went on their uncompensated leave, who now are moved from their current position elsewhere because someone came back. In corporate structure, and I am accused, on this board is accused of 2 things, of running this district like a business or not running it like a business. But in business, if you leave a job to take a new job, you left your job. You don't get to come back. Now, I have hired people back when they've come back and said it didn't work out, and I thought they were a great employee, and they came back. But I didn't guarantee them their job to come back to when they left to start a new one. So while this will go through tonight, I would like to ask this board to look at the policy. Christine, just tell me the number, I'll repeat it off the camera.
438.1.
438.1, to review policy 438.1 about leave. The times, they are changing. These are difficult times for many people, and we don't have a problem hiring staff into this district. People want to work here. I don't think this is I think this is an anachronism. I think we can craft it better. So I'll vote for this, but I want to bring it to the board's attention at this point.
Other comments?
Yes. If the board approves this motion, you will or you may be approving the memo that is attached also to the agenda, and I guess the solicitor can advise you if that's the case.
Well, my understanding from the personnel actions is that that individual referenced in the memo is built into these personnel actions so that arrangement is part of what's being approved here.
And
Is that, Ms. Trioli, is that how you?
I thought we were just doing the actions themselves, though.
Well, but the memo reflects nothing more than what is in the actions.
Well, the personnel actions themselves doesn't mention what's in that memo. So, so I believe that...
You're correct, Mr. Abramson. I'm sorry. With that one exception, with that one specific issue.
And reluctantly, very reluctantly, I can't approve that. And I could give my reasons in executive session since it's a personnel matter, but it's late. And I believe if you read the memo, you can discern the reasons why I would not vote for it.
Which paragraph are you referring to as your problem?
It's the memo.
Well, Mark, is there anything in the memo that isn't in the personnel actions?
Yes.
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 Right. The memo is requesting for you to approve us to allow that employee to continue on our benefits plan for one additional month.
At whose expense?
At our expense.
But he would pay his employee share.
But would he pay the employee share or the COBRA rate? Would he pay 102% of his share?
No, just the employee rate. That's what the memo is requesting.
You know, I got so involved in the other aspects of the memo, I missed that point.
Because of the FTE reduction to 0.4, 0.6 is the threshold to have benefits. So what the employee has asked, and he has agreed to reduce from 0.1 to 0.4, which helps us greatly because there's a foreign language teacher, which they're challenging to find, and then when you put on top of that a 0.4 schedule, his staying on with us until November will give us some time to find a candidate and do that search. So what he has asked is would the district be willing to allow him 1 month of employee benefits rather than COBRA.
And I guess my question to you is a suspension that is being requested, is it covered under COBRA? Would he be able to cover himself under COBRA with this?
He could.
Well then, in many ways, I'll agree with Rick, which the issue becomes moot. Because what happens is, if he chooses or she chooses not to take the benefits, with COBRA you have 30 to 60 days in arrears to buy your benefits. So the issue is moot, that if the person discontinues their benefits, we disallow that aspect of the memo, and they have no claim for insurance during that period, they don't pay the benefit, they don't pay the fees. If they were to have incurred a loss that they wanted compensation for, that was in excess of what their fees would be, they pay their fees in arrears. They would pay their fees because you'll hand them a COBRA notice, which 60 days later he has looked back. So the issue's moot, we shouldn't offer it. And I'd ask to remove the,
That's not our recommendation. And I'm going to say this to you one more time because this has been in front of the board for 2 weeks. We're asking for this accommodation because this employee made a significant accommodation for us. He could stay with a 1.0 teaching schedule to the end of November and then go on his leave.
Mark.
Just let me finish. He decided to go back to a 0.4 position to allow us to elevate a person who could be that 1.0, and in so doing took a significant drop in his salary for that period of time. All we're simply asking to do is hold him and his family on benefits for 1 more month. Overall, the actual amount of money we incur in terms of the change is relatively small, and that's what Christine and I are both recommending with respect to this issue.
And I understand your point, and my point is that because of the structure of COBRA law, and it should have been explained to him and understood, that nobody has to pay for that benefit unless there's a claim, in which case he can buy it in arrears. It's the way COBRA law works, the continuation of benefits. There's a 60-day look back that you don't pay your benefit. You have 60 days to act upon your loss of benefits. If in that time you have a loss and you pay the claim, you're paid as if you had a continuation of service. So nobody has to pay pay it if we don't agree to do it.
He's going to remain our employee. He's moving from a 1.0 position to a .4 position. At that point, he's no longer eligible to be on our plan. So what we're asking, and I don't want to, I can look into what you're saying and get back to you in a clear way, but all we're saying is instead of dropping him off of our plan is to leave him on for the 1 month. I don't, that's it. I think it's getting overcomplicated.
I understand what you're saying completely, and I think technically you are correct, but this is somebody who doesn't want to roll the dice and then potentially have to pay that COBRA rate.
Right.
And in order to compensate the district for our paying that month's premium, he's working more time than he originally agreed. So you may not think that's good enough, but I'm not so sure that he either pays it if he uses it or rolls the dice and hopes nobody in the family needs it for that month. I completely understand that concept. That wasn't the intent of COBRA, I might add, but technically you're correct, it could be done. But then he pays for the full month if he uses it. He's saying, I don't want that. I want to be covered proactively, if something happens, my family's covered. And you, district, if you give me that, this is what I give you. If we don't agree to that, that's fine. Not fine with them, but that's our choice. But I don't think you can just say, well, roll the dice and hopefully you won't have to pay, but if you do, then you're going to go back and pay COBRA afterwards. And
I just want to be clear, we're asking for this sort of thing because it's in the best interest of the students and the continuity of the education they're being delivered, right?
Absolutely. And in effect, I will represent to you, for this teacher, you're getting a 2.0. You're getting another 1.0 teacher, because he's not leaving Holland after the .4. He's there all day. He was there at the Council Rock South Vigil. He had no reason to be there. That's what you're doing here. You're paying for a little bit of goodwill for what is an extraordinary teacher. And we're sad to see him go. He's not leaving because he's exploring a new opportunity. He's leaving because his wife is transferred.
And I think it's a goodwill gesture to thank somebody who is, in essence, helping us to get through what could be a very rocky transition. And I echo what Mark said. It's someone who goes above and beyond all the time. And it's such a small cost that we're going to make up very quickly because his replacement will come in at step 0 and he's at step 2. So it's not a cost factor to do this for this person.
Okay.
I think in his asking, it was a rather innocent request, and we felt compelled to bring it to you and anticipated that this was going to be the conversation because we felt like it was worth making that gesture.
Can you explain to me how this employee is still eligible after they've left? Because you're asking for a month after this person has left.
No, we're asking for the month that he's remaining with us to help us in our transition.
Where he would normally be ineligible, correct?
Right, exactly. He would be, you have to have a .6 FTE to be eligible for employee benefits.
Or he could just stay and be a full employee, paid full salary. And the backup guy who's going to come in and go forward for the rest of the year gets no training from him.
But I'm not sure, just explain to me how we can, if someone is ineligible for our benefits, how we can grant them that benefit
So
if they're
the
ineligible.
president of the association has agreed to, they're amenable to us allowing him to do this, and that's why it's in front of you.
So they're amenable to us spending more money.
It's an exception that we're asking for.
Two things. One, you've just told me that the association, the union with whom we bargain, is agreeable to spending more of our money, which, yeah, I'd be agreeable to. And the second thing I want to be really, really clear on this is, I don't know this person from Adam, so I don't want anybody to construe that my comments tonight in any way reflect upon the individual. My observations are purely, as reflected in the conversation, on technical issues and on policy issues of the board, no reflection upon the individual.
And to Mr. Bowles' point, I think what we technically would have to do is pay COBRA for him, because he can't. That's what I think we were hung up. Blue Cross, and we have a contract, and our contract says eligible employees. So we would, unless you have an exception with Blue Cross, but
right. So if
that is not my value.
If we have to pay COBRA for him, then the issue really is moot, because when he discontinues, we don't have to pay it from day one. we can pay it.
So you're saying we should roll the dice, and if his family doesn't have a
It's the
claim?
same, we're going to pay the same thing either way.
I'm not in favor of that personally.
Well,
I'm
okay.
not.
Well, I said I'd agree to this before, I can't agree with it. I didn't understand the issue until Mr. Abramson brought it forward.
And Bob just raised a good point in a sidebar, is that we're self-insured. So that we're not barred from doing this for him from any agreement, as far as I know. I mean, I can check Mrs. Thomas, but it's not my understanding that we can't.
Would the association be willing to pay for it?
Yes. The
Would the
association
union be
says
willing to pay for it? If they agreed to it, would they be
such a
willing to pay
small
for it?
cost.
I understand, so
I do
would
feel
they be
like
willing
we're
to pay?
getting a little lost in that. Did you want this?
Us keeping them on is no claims because we're self-insured. The only thing we pay is the retention of $52 for that month. And in fact, I believe he would be reimbursing us more than the $52 if there's no claims, Jerry. So you know what I'm saying? Because we're
Yes.
self-insured, it's not a monthly premium that
Yes.
we're paying for keep him on. It's only if he has a claim. It does expose us to risk, of course, but that's really the financial transaction that occurs. It's $52 that we pay because it's the administrative fee we
Right.
pay, but other than that, there's no certain cost.
Just one other question for my clarification. Does this set any precedent for anyone else that's in this situation next month, next year, 6 months from now?
The idea would be to MOU it with the association so as to ensure that it does not.
That's why they asked the association.
Right. We'd be willing to do that.
And the association will agree that I'm sure, that it doesn't set precedent or practice.
Well, should the memo then be put aside from the motion and brought back at our meeting next week when there's been an MOU structured, rather than just agreeing with something because the union might or might not? I don't know. Should we separate them?
I don't want it to become that this is not at all a union matter. They didn't bring this to us. This was a request that the employee made to the principal. Out of courtesy, we let them know that we were entertaining this. So I don't want this for you to perceive that the association didn't bring this to us.
I
They
understand
did
that.
not.
The issue is, would the union potentially look at this, would the association potentially look at this retrospectively in another situation and say, you have already done this, your established past practice, as began the conversation when we talked about should we permit this type of thing at all, we laid on the situation that we had a past practice. This would then, all that we're asking for is that they agree that the instance that we're asking about here is not seen to be precedential.
Could we simply vote on the personnel actions, and then I'll ask Mr. Cox to draw up an MOU, and we'll make that part of the personnel actions that will come before the board on the 18th.
So we're
And what
excluding the memo then.
And what the memo said, what the motion said was, I move to approve the personnel actions. So does that include the memo or not, and do we need to redefine our motion?
Mr. Klein, I don't even think the MOU needs to come back. I think when the district says the board has approved this, President of the association, please sign this one-page acknowledgement that this won't set practice or precedent. That's good enough. And I can. Thank you.
Can we make the motion conditioned upon the acceptance that this is not precedential by the association? In which case, if they don't sign it, the item doesn't go through. And that doesn't have to come back to the board then.
That's fine with me. Yeah. The association will sign it, I'm sure.
Okay, so who made the, so we're going to make, so to the maker, who made the motion?
Mrs. Sexton? No, we're not voting.
No, I didn't vote. I did vote.
Yes to Mr.
Yes to our secretary that I made the motion.
Okay, will you amend the motion to say that I move to approve the personnel actions as contained in the attachment to the agenda with, I don't know how you...
To include subject to the association's acknowledgement of no practice or precedent.
Yes.
Who seconded it?
Mr. Block?
Second.
Okay, good. Can we have a roll call vote, please?
Sure. Mr. Abramson?
No.
Mr. Block?
Yes.
Mrs. Brooks?
Yes.
Mr. Bialik?
Yes.
Dr. Foster?
Yes.
Mr. Grupp?
No.
Mrs. McKessie stepped out. Mrs. Sexton?
Oh, I'm sorry. Ms. McKessie had to leave for
Personal
personal reasons.
Mrs. Sexton?
Yes.
Mrs. Thomas? Yes.
Thank you.
Item number 3, Mr. Block.
I move to approve.
Is there a new number for that, Mr. Reinhardt?
And I'll explain the change. The number that should go in the motion is $2,735,005.
I move to approve amendment number 7 to the Facilities Services Agreement with Aramark Management Services for the 2014-2015 school year at a cost of $2,735,005, subject to audit.
Second.
Mr. Reinhardt?
I want to thank Mr. Abramson for catching this. There are 2 components to this agreement. One of them, which is the one we really negotiated, is the cost associated with the custodial services throughout the building. The other cost is $5,300 for the energy services that they provide us. Energy services stayed flat, and it's the same amount as the previous year. We did negotiate a 2.1% increase in the cost for the custodial services. One of the components of that is with Goodnow increasing space, and there's a 27,000 square foot space that's going to be going in place over time. Usually they come in with another amendment to say, because of that space, you're going to pay another $1.43 to have that space cleaned. What we did is have them agree that they're not going to increase the cost for that space over this time, and that they're going to set the 2.1, but not increase the square footage, and that's the negotiations. The calculations I did is really more like if it was going for the full year that they'd clean that space, the increase would be about a 0.6% increase over last year. So that's what happened. I did not include the 5,300 in any of those numbers, and Mr. Abramson caught that. So if you look at the narrative, the original number should be $2,678,860, and then the new number would be $2,735,005, which is what you're approving tonight.
At our most recent facilities meeting, you're going to bid this for this is this coming year, but after that, you're anticipating rebidding?
We said that we were talking about that I wanted Mr. Taylor in the room with us when we discussed that.
Okay. I just, because we had broached the topic at that time about re-specifying what is happening in the frequency, but that's to be considered the RFP. Yes. Okay, fine.
Any other questions or comments? Hearing no objection, I ask the Secretary to record the motion as passing with unanimous consent. Item number 4, Dr. Foster.
I move to approve the 2014-2015 Council Rock School District school bus lists as contained in the attachment to this agenda.
Second.
Was anybody able to open the attachment?
I opened them at home.
Were you able to open it? I just can't get it open.
I was able to open it.
You put it out? No, I'm kidding. Thank you.
Why didn't you read the attachment to us?
It is a lot of data, which if you ask me a question, I'll have to get back to you.
Well, I appreciate it. It's sad because I saw it briefly, but it's in the format I always requested, and so thank you. It's an Excel format, so you can actually massage it ourselves.
Okay. Any other questions? Hearing no objection, I ask that the Secretary record the motion as passing with unanimous consent. On to board topics. We already discussed capital planning. Pliggett? I know, I feel bad though. I told you to wait because I was hoping it would be earlier, and now it's 11:05. Okay. I'm so sorry. That's why I didn't say.
Well, I don't know how, I guess this is my item, so I don't know how you'd like me to begin, but I've been declining or voting no on the Treasurer's reports for the past few months because of my concern over the funds held at Pliggett and the insurance coverage of those funds and the fees associated. When I first read the Pliggett's annual report, they referenced a $500,000 SIPC coverage. At the time, we had about $54 million, I think it was, with Pliggett. So my original concern was the coverage of that $54 million with only $500,000 Through Mr. Reinhardt, we contacted Pliget at the time and asked if there was any additional insurance, and we were told there wasn't. Delving into the data more, I became concerned about the additional fees or the fees charged that I felt were maybe high for the returns that we were getting. So we got together and we had a presentation by Pliget and asked some of the questions about that. We did receive some information about insurance coverage from, I think, U.S. Bank?
Custodial Bank,
Yeah, right. So what we were...
I forgot, yeah.
So what we were told was, actually, Pliget doesn't hold any of its deposit versus payment. The funds immediately transfer to the custodian bank. So there is 25 and I think $50 million in coverage, 25 being specific to an incident. And then we did get a report of fees at the last meeting, but I didn't bring it with me. I apologize. So I don't know where you want to go from there. Just have a conversation, or do you want to know my thoughts on it?
Sure.
Well, my thoughts are, I'm much more comfortable with the $25 million level, and I don't want to get into a pooled risk situation with the additional, the amount over the $25 million. What I would suggest, though, overall is, and I think that we can pay for this, if there's any additional cost, we can pay for this cost out of the potential savings of fees. I would suggest that the board RFP for an investment consultant to help the administration wade through these issues, to take some of the burden off the administration and help us with that fiduciary responsibility that we have to direct these funds, because I think it's unfair to just ask the administration to be solely responsible for where these funds are held, how they're insured, the interest rate we're receiving, the fees that we're paying, the liquidity, and all those issues.
So the board treasurer, like, are there any aspects of this that relate to the board treasurer role, or is this kind of CFO activity something that's separate from being a business administrator or a board treasurer?
Ask Bob, I don't know the answer to it.
I think I'd rather hear a legal answer to this as opposed to a practical answer on the way I handle things. So
Okay.
it's probably
My bad.
best to have a legal opinion, and you may not be prepared for it, right?
Well, I can answer Dr. Foster's question, I think, which is that, I mean, not to punt this to Mr. Reinhardt, but, I mean, the school code places the overall oversight of the district's finances with him.
Acting as treasurer?
Yes.
Okay.
And Bob wears two hats. He's treasurer, he's the school board's treasurer, which is under one section of the school code. And he's also the school district's business manager. Under a separate section of the school code, those duties overlap, obviously.
And we're properly insured for all of the fidelity and all that type of stuff. I believe for any of my fiduciary responsibility.
And I do want to say that in no way do I doubt Bob's capabilities, and in no way do I doubt the health of Pliget. But we've lived through 2008, 2009, with large firms went out of business and things were at risk that we didn't know were at risk. So I don't like to push things past our insurance points. That's my only concern. I don't see any risk of Pliget collapsing tomorrow, but you never know. But I don't want the administration to take any offense to my calling out this question.
Mr. Bollock, it's not FDIC insurance, is it?
It's SIPC.
Okay.
But for me...
But that doesn't apply. What we learned was that actually doesn't apply. It's on their annual report, but it doesn't apply.
Right. I mean, for me, when we got the explanation of the custodial bank role, and that these are bonds, basically U.S. Treasury-backed securities, so that the default risk is not in the custodial bank, because we learned if they fail, then the securities are transferred to another custodial bank. So the default risk is in the bonds themselves, as I understood it, and we're doing the best we can by having U.S. Treasuries. But the fee part, you know, I just, Mr. Bilek brought it up. And this is a trust. It's been in existence for, I don't know, decades. It's probably not under a lot of pressure to optimize its fees, I'm guessing. So it's possible that if we look at the fees, they're not as good as they could be, and it would be worth looking at.
Well, my point is that I don't think this should be an undertaking on the board or Mr. Reiner. I think that just like everything else that we do, we should hire a professional to give us that objective data, because when the representatives from Pliget, who are employees of PFM, who are the managers of that fund and have been the only managers historically and will probably be the only managers forever, whenever you're getting information, and you've heard this from me about other things, healthcare or what have you, whenever you're getting information directly from the people who are benefiting from it, there's always a potential for bias there, right? It's not untruthful, it's not that they're misleading us, it's just there's a potential for bias. I did feel like it took us too long to get that fee information, but I would like an objective third party that works for us to be able to give us that information about where we should hold these funds, how we should invest these funds. Now, the investment of those funds are very limited because there's a school code that says we can only invest in certain instruments, but we have to also make sure, part of that consultant's job would be to make sure that the manager of those funds is following that school code. Because right now, the word from PFM is, yes, we're following the school code. So there's nothing wrong with double checking it. And my belief is, and maybe it'll pan out to be wrong, but I do think that the fees that we're paying the trust are high. I think that we can realize some savings by bringing in a consultant, and that'll probably pay for itself, give us an additional layer of protection for the district and for Mr. Reiner as our treasurer.
I mean, for me, rather than just jumping straight to an RFP to a consultant, I would rather have a consultant to tell us, are we doing okay, or should we consider hiring a consultant to run our finances?
Well,
so that's where I'm at. I mean, maybe we're fine. Maybe we couldn't do better.
I've had that discussion with some folks in the business, and the feeling is fees are high. I mean, I don't think there's any concern that it's being invested in properly.
But we haven't heard it as a board.
But the fees are high, and we correct. But what we do know now is I don't know how we are today, but we have a $25 million threshold for our insurance purposes, right? Per incident insurance. And I'm not comfortable with $25 million and $1. And I want to stay within the insurance coverages.
You have any thoughts, Mr. Reinhardt?
This is a very complex issue with where the insurance comes in and out. And I will just say that the portfolio of investments that are supporting our Pliget investments are probably the most secure you can get, with it being either the full faith of the credit of the United States government or U.S. Treasuries, and they're very short term. There's no long-term investments or anything that's where I put my faith in where we are with that. The same way as the yield is not a great yield right now. And with the Treasury, what the market interest rate with the short-term Treasuries are, there's not a lot of yield to go anywhere. So it isn't like the old times right now. Will it change and our yields start going up? Maybe it will. And the market conditions will be very different.
So I hear you saying that there's not a way to protect our risk any better, but from a fee standpoint, is there a way to manage our costs better? And by virtue of us providing you with a consultant to help you out, is there a benefit to you? Would that potentially help us save money if we can't mitigate risk?
Would it be someone looking over my shoulder and saying, yes, it's good, or no, it isn't, and give me ways to do that? I'll be looking over his shoulder too, believe me. So it'll be both ways. I am not going to tell you that I believe it's completely necessary. If you want to do it, I'm fine with it, because it is only going to be something that's going to support me in what I do. If that's your choice, though. Am I a person coming to you and saying, I think this is necessary and all that? I didn't say that. But if you want to do that, I'm ready to work with them, and I will work with them, and we'll see how it goes. That's all.
For me, it's akin to the construction manager and architect that we asked to come in to give us plans for a middle school in different scenarios. We wouldn't ask Mr. Taylor to draft those plans and to be the construction manager and to be the architect and make sure that the everything, every detail is on time and safe and within budget and everything else. We expect Mr. Taylor to oversee the entire project. What we're asking Mr. Reinhardt to do is oversee everything and handle every single detail and to make sure that everything's being done. So we're asking him to sit in his office and be on job site, to use an analogy like Jerry likes to do. That's my opinion.
For me, just so we know, we used to hire Doug when he was at Dewey to do exactly what we hire construction managers to do. And we brought Doug here because he knew both sides of the equation really, really good. I think we have the same thing in many ways in Bob. So for me, when we would write the RFP for the construction manager, this is just number 17 of having done that many times. We know exactly what goes into the structure. I'm less defined about what the RFP is. So I'm not sure if I'm up to the RFP stage or the RFI stage. And I think I am more, the differentiation for those people who don't live this acronym world, is request for information or request for proposal. And so while I may not get to the request for proposal part yet, which says, here's what I want you to do, tell me how much you're going to do it, the RFI is really going to be a little more of the structure, which I think helps to answer Bill's question, which says, tell me what you could do in this area to help support me. And we get back from a few of the same people who answer us and say, well, we would provide you counseling in this aspect or that aspect. You, Mark, have spoken with people you know professionally in this realm. We don't have that resource, so this would kind of, the RFI, Bob, I'm looking for an acknowledgement, yes or no, just, I'm getting a nod, yes, I imagine you're going along with it. The RFI, I think, would allow us to get a few professionals in this realm to come back and give us how their business works to support it. Let us look through that and determine from there, do we go to RFP? Because, and Bill summarized it well, I'm not sure what I would need to buy yet. And that would help me clarify that. So I'm good. If the RFP doesn't cost much, the RFI should cost even less. I'd be glad to go with an RFI. I think it's a step towards the RFP. It just helps get all the board alignment around what this service would be. So I would not be in disagreement with going for an RFI at this point. Bob, are you aligned with that?
I'm fine with that.
Okay.
The board's wishes is what I'm going to do. It really is.
Thank you, Jeannie. The board's wishes, Mike. Okay.
Any other comments? Is the board in agreement to ask Bob to do an RFI for this?
Well, Mark's going to help me.
Well,
Yes? No?
Yeah, I support taking a look.
Did I say yes? Anybody else?
I mean, I know there's going to be constraints. This is a specialized marketplace, so it's not like any financial manager can come in who does wealth advisement for wealthy people. This is a school district. There's all kinds of legal constraints, so the firm has to understand. But
yeah, the pool is very, very shallow here for the experts in the area, and I have to tell you, for the amount of money we're talking about, it's going to be. We may have the same situation with what we have with the RFPs for the legal representation, but we'll do the best we can. But again, I think it's from our duties as a board and Bob's duties as a treasurer, I think we at least have to look to see if
Okay.
we get any help.
Hearing no objection from anyone. Okay. All right, moving on to committee reports.
Academic standards, which was supposed to be last week, temporarily rescheduled for tonight, is actually happening 1 week from tonight, the 18th. There are 2 items on the agenda. First, we will talk about the new elementary report cards, and then we will have a conversation about full-day kindergarten. And I've been getting several emails from members of the community, so
good.
We might have a decent audience for that, which is great.
You might need to move
What?
venues. Room may not big enough.
We're going to hold it south? Jim?
Facilities Committee in Kyle's absence. Doug?
Yeah, there was an update provided on the Goodnow Elementary School project, provided an overview of the status of all the capital improvement projects for the summer, discussed the Newtown Middle School project and the professionals involved in that project, touched on the house track barn demolition, and a couple other minor items. The next meeting with facilities is scheduled for October 30th at this point.
Okay, thank you. Finance, Bill?
Yeah, so we met on August 28th. The first item was we discussed the contracts. Mr. Reinhardt presented a list of contracts that are significant costs to the district that are in our near future. One of them included transportation, which was the next item. One of them included Aramark. So, and we had a discussion of what contracts maybe we should include, should we include insurance or what have you. But this is a new habit for us to track the multi-year contracts that will be coming up in the future so that we can plan ahead. Mr. Pinero talked about the transportation contract that's going out to RFP, and that's our buses. Who's going to supply our buses and what are they going to run on. So the proposal is to have an RFP to look at the transportation, but also the possibility of having buses that use alternative fuels such as propane. We did discuss, that was the majority of the discussion. We brought up towards the end whether we should include natural gas or not. Not sure where that will be in the RFP. And then we discussed financial information from the Capital Planning Committee, how to look at school costs, and that was basically looking at an average school and the drivers to the costs, which included such things as class size, and that was to inform the kind of discussion that we had earlier tonight. The next meeting, when is the next meeting?
October 30th.
October 30th. Wow, it's a long time into the future. So.
Okay, thank you. MBIT, anything?
Mr. Bonick, do you want to say anything about it?
No, you can take it, thank you.
So we were both there, and it was just this past Monday. We actually spent most of our time electing officials to PSBA. That seemed to be a lot of the Executive Council's energy, not necessarily well spent. But the best part of the meeting was Mrs. Strauss, the principal of MBIT, or the head administrator. She presented the goals for the year for MBIT, and it was a multi-page presentation and PowerPoint. And I'll just say some of them. So, we're looking at what high priority occupations in Pennsylvania should be considered in future course offerings of MBIT. There's going to be a new school store that will sell things that the kids make at it, and it'll be part of the business curriculum. So that's, and then of course, better promoting MBIT to the secondary students and adults is one of the goals for the years as well, and improving the IT and school operations. So there was much more to it. I just want to say that happened.
Do you know if they can if they still make the park benches that you can buy?
I don't know, but if they do, they'll be at the school store.
The
You should come and see that.
They did make park benches that you could buy. Put them in the backyard, put them out in the yard here, but.
Well, they did show some renovations that they've done over the summer to the auto lab, they call it, and it's really quite impressive. It makes me want to go back and do it a little differently.
Well, the neat thing about their renovations is they do them themselves because they know how to do that kind of thing.
I want to know if they do the student-built house, if they're going to fit that in the school store. How's that going to work?
Maybe a small version.
What do you think the student store, forget it. The student store is?
The IU?
The IU does not meet in August. We meet on next Tuesday.
Perfect. I have one announcement, and then I'll do public comment, but I just wanted to let the board know that we received a note from the Cheltenham Township School Board gestures to our loss. So I'm just going to pass this around if anybody wants to see it. We got a few others, which was very nice on email, so everybody saw them, but that came in hard copy. Okay, so I'm going to move on to the final public comment. Does anybody want to speak? No? Okay, then I'm not going to read my dissertation on how we should behave when we speak. I'm going to say thank you for everyone's time and effort and patience tonight. I know we have a lot of meetings this month and perhaps a lot of long meetings, but it's important stuff, and thank you everyone for your hard work. Meeting adjourned.
Oh, wait, there was an executive session before the meeting on personnel and several personnel matters, and that's it.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Meeting adjourned.